Chapter 1063. She knew that she had to give the other party absolute trust, but she couldn't help but feel that something was amiss. Was there something wrong with her? Why did it feel like Enchanting was hiding something from her? With this thought in mind, she glanced at Enchanting through the rearview mirror. Enchanting's gaze was focused on the road ahead as he drove, just like any other day. Due to Coco's illness, she didn't go to kindergarten the next day. However, Lingwan had an important meeting in the morning, so she left Coco in the care of the auntie and went to work. In the afternoon, she called the auntie and learned that Coco's fever had subsided. Lingwan was relieved. But at 3 in the afternoon, after Lingwan was done with her work, she bade farewell to her superior and returned home early. Coco was still a little listless after her fever subsided, but she was delighted to see Lingwan back. She quickly dragged Lingwan along to paint with her. At around 5:00, Lingwan went to prepare some milk for Kiki. For the time being, Kiki, who was left alone, hugged a furry bunny and strolled around the house. When she reached the balcony, she suddenly pressed her face tightly against the glass and looked outside. Lingwan came out with a milk bottle and called out to Coco, but the latter ignored her. "Coco, what are you looking at?" Lingwan asked as she walked over to the balcony. Before she could get close, she saw Coco slapping on the window and shouting, "Daddy!" Lingwan frowned. She was just about to reprimand Coco when she suddenly thought of something. She hastened her footsteps to the balcony and looked down through the window. Just as she had guessed, it was Lu Benlai. He wasn't sitting in the car but leaning against it, talking on the phone. "Daddy, Daddy!" Lu Benlai couldn't hear Coco's voice at all, but Coco still shouted at him. Lingwan retracted her gaze and squatted down to pass the milk bottle to Coco. "Coco, stop shouting. He won't be able to hear you. Be careful, or your throat might hurt." Coco pushed the milk bottle away and pointed to the bottom of the window. Then, she said to Lingwan, "Daddy, Daddy, Coco, you have to drink milk. If you continue like this, Mommy will get angry." As if she had been wronged, Coco pouted her lips and her eyes reddened. "I don't want milk, I want Daddy." Before Lingwan could say anything, tears rolled down from the corner of Coco's eyes. "I want Daddy, Daddy." Lingwan averted her gaze and stared at Lu Benlai for a moment before reaching out to wipe away the tears on Keek's face. "Drink the milk, and I'll let you go downstairs to play with Daddy, alright?" Coco immediately smiled and replied with a childish "alright" before taking the milk bottle. She stared at Lu Benlai through the window, fearing that he would leave at any moment, and without even catching her breath, she began gulping down the milk bottle in her mouth. It didn't take long for the milk to reach the bottom. Kiki looked at Lingwan expectantly before grabbing the latter's hand and pulling her toward the door. "Mommy, let's go downstairs." "Let's go downstairs, Kiki. If you continue like this, you'll catch a cold. You'll have to go to the hospital to take medicine like last night. Mommy will get you some thick clothes." Chapter 1064. Little Darling's fever has just subsided. "It's not good for her to continue like this, right?" the auntie asked hesitantly. Lingwan took out the thickest jacket from Keek's wardrobe and said, "It's fine to wear something thicker." Lingwan bent down to help Kiki put on the jacket before helping her put on her shoes. After that, she opened the door and said to the auntie, "Go on." Seeing how insistent Lingwan was, the auntie could only put on her shoes, carry the eager Kiki, and enter the elevator. A few minutes later, Lingwan received a call from the auntie. "Do you still remember the man who sent Little Darling home the other time? When Little Darling met him, she kept calling him Daddy and even wanted him to hug her. I couldn't hold her back at all, and whenever I did, Little Darling would cry. Do you want to come down and discipline Little Darling? It's fine. If Kiki wants to play with him, let her." "Ah," that's not a good idea, right? The auntie suddenly realized something and asked with a hushed voice, is he really Keek's father? Lang Wan didn't say anything. The auntie continued, it's no wonder he interfered when we were moving the other time. It's also no wonder he would come to our place every night. At this point, the auntie noticed that Lang Wan wasn't speaking at all. Realizing that she had said too much, she hurriedly said, I know what I'm doing now. You should get back to work. I'll be hanging up now. Lang Wan replied with an before lowering the phone from her ear and pressing on the button to hang up. She washed and cut the ingredients that the auntie had prepared halfway in the kitchen before walking out of the kitchen. When the porridge was almost done, she would start cooking. She switched on the television and sat on the sofa to watch it for a while. Then, she couldn't help but stand up and walk to the window. Lu Benlai was hugging Kiki as he squatted on the lawn of the neighborhood. It was hard to tell what he was studying. Kiki seemed to be very happy, and her hands were dancing around. There was even a yellow hat on Keek's head with a pair of fluffy ears, making her look really adorable. Lu Benlai was dressed in a high-end suit, and Coco's tiny hands were constantly grabbing onto the floor and touching his body, causing his clothes to become dirty. However, he didn't show the slightest bit of disdain toward her actions. In fact, he even raised his hand up high, allowing Coco's shoe to step on his shoulder. Staring at the image of them together for a while, Lang Wan suddenly recalled the photo that Shi Yao had sent her a few days ago. She searched for her phone, opened WeChat, and scrolled to the chat history. She had left Coco at Shi Yao's place when she was out on a business trip, and Coco had met Lu Benlai and interacted with him. Back then, when she saw the photo, she could already feel Keek's happiness. Now that she was seeing the father and daughter together with her own eyes, she realized that Keek's happiness was something that no one else could give her. Only when she was with Lu Benlai would she feel such happiness. It was a bond that blood was thicker than water. Mom, what is Dad? Mom, the kids in kindergarten all said that they have a father. Why don't I have a father? Mom, Lin sure said that he gave his father to me. Can I have it? Mom, can I have a father for my birthday present this year? Chapter 1065. She could clearly feel her heart wavering bit by bit. Not for anything else, but for Kiki. To her, Kiki was her everything. As a mother, it was only natural that she wanted her daughter to possess the most perfect of everything. As usual, Lin Jai had a dinner to attend. Usually, she would take the elevator to the parking lot and leave the company. But today, before she left the company, she habitually opened the drawer beside her desk to place a heat pack on her lower abdomen, only to realize that it was all used up. The heat pack in the drawer was also prepared for her by the navigator. In the 7 years that he was around, she had never lacked these things. Staring at the empty drawer, Lin Jai suddenly felt a little hollow in her heart. Boss Lin. Can we set off now? Boss Lin. All of a sudden, there was a knock on the door, followed by her assistant's voice. Recovering from her daze, Lin Jai replied with an "oh" before closing the drawer. She grabbed her clothes and bag and walked out of the office. Perhaps it was because she had seen the navigator last night, but she had been thinking about him non-stop today. After entering the elevator, her assistant habitually pressed the button for the parking lot in the basement. But when they reached the 6th floor, Lin Jai suddenly said, "I'll be downstairs. Get the car and pick me up at the entrance. I'll head to the supermarket next door to buy some things." The assistant replied, "All right." Upon reaching the 1st floor, Lin Jai got out of the elevator first. Barely after taking 2 steps toward the entrance of the company, she realized that there was a huge commotion at the entrance. "If you continue like this, I'll call the police." From a distance away, she heard the voice of the receptionist. When she walked up to the receptionist, she asked, "What's wrong?" Many people immediately turned their heads to look at her. As most of them were employees of the Lin family enterprise, they recognized Lin Jiayi, so they quickly opened up a path for her. It was only then that Lin Jiayi realized that the person who was being held back by the security guard was a middle-aged man. Furious, the man charged into the Lin family enterprise while shouting, "I want to meet the higher-ups of the Lin family enterprise. How dare such a big company scam a small company like us?" Hearing the man's words, Lin Jiayi's frown deepened. "What's going on?" Noticing Lin Jiayi walking over, the receptionist hurriedly explained. As soon as he arrived, he immediately demanded to meet the chairman, claiming that our company had scammed him. I checked the records, and I found that he didn't have an appointment with the chairman, so I didn't allow him to head upstairs. I told him that I could help him make an appointment with the chairman, but he immediately kicked up a huge fuss, claiming that I was intentionally obstructing him, saying that the Lin Enterprise was going back on its word. In any case, his words were really nasty, so I had no choice but to invite security over to escort him out. "Your Lin's Enterprise is a fraud. You bullied a small company like ours. Such a big company relied on scams to get to where it is today. I want to see your higher-ups. I don't care. I have a contract in my hand. You haven't done what you promised me." After hearing the front desk lady's words, the man suddenly jumped up in rage. Seeing him like this, the security guard subconsciously wanted to control him. Lin Jiayi hurriedly shot a glance at the security guard, signaling him not to act rashly. After which, she turned to the middle-aged man and asked with an understanding tone, "You said that you have a contract with you. Can you show it to me?" Chapter 1066. The middle-aged man didn't seem to believe that Lin Jiayi was a high-ranking executive of the Lin family enterprise. He assessed her from head to toe and asked, "Are you really a high-ranking executive of the Lin family enterprise?" Lin Jiayi nodded, and the others around her echoed in agreement. Only then did the middle-aged man finally believe her. He took out a contract from a shabby briefcase he carried with him and passed it over to Lin Jiayi. "Look, it's written in black and white, and there's even a stamp on it." Lin Jiayi didn't respond to his words. Instead, she took the contract and took a closer look. This was the latest real estate development project of the Lin family enterprise, and in the contract, the middle-aged man's company would be in charge of the renovation of the project. Lin Jiayi's name was written on the signature column of the contract. Her aunt was the one in charge of this project, and she had never interfered with it at all. So, how could she possibly have signed it? Moreover, even though these three words were deliberately imitating her signature, as the person herself, she could still recognize that this was not her handwriting at all. Lin Jiayi's frown deepened. There were too many employees in the surroundings, and it wasn't appropriate for her to reveal this matter to the public. Thus, she kept the contract and said to the middle-aged man, "How about this? Follow me upstairs to my office to discuss this matter." The middle-aged man nodded. "All right." Lin Jiayi smiled politely at him as she gestured for him to enter the elevator. After the middle-aged man followed her into the elevator, Lin Jiayi took out her phone and gave her assistant a call, instructing her to return to her office first. Upon reaching the top floor, Lin Jiayi politely invited the middle-aged man into her office and gestured for him to take a seat. After which, she gestured for her assistant to brew a cup of tea for the middle-aged man before speaking up, "To tell you the truth, I am indeed Lin Jiayi. However, I really wasn't the one who signed this contract because I wasn't in charge of this project at all. If I'm not mistaken, you must have been scammed by someone else. However, don't get too anxious yet. Can you tell me everything from the start to the end? This way, once I understand the situation, I might be able to provide you with some clues to help you." The middle-aged man wasn't an unreasonable person. Perhaps it was because he had been forced into a corner that he decided to throw a tantrum. Seeing how polite Lin Jai was, his tone immediately softened. It's like this. Around last month, a friend of mine introduced me to a family member of an upper echelon of the Lin Consortium, and he said that he could help me secure a collaboration. Lin Consortium. Of course, I'd be overjoyed. Given such an opportunity for a small company like mine, there's no way I'd be willing to let it slip by. Then, my friend told me that I had to give the family member some benefits. To be honest, I don't earn much money, and my company has just started not too long ago. But still, I gritted my teeth and gave the family member 500,000 yuan. After which, he signed the contract with me. See, it's been more than a month since then, and I saw on the news that the project had already begun, but we still haven't received the commencement notice yet. Family member. Since when did the Lin clan have such a family member? If it was 5 million yuan, she could still believe it. But 500,000 yuan. Surely, the Lin clan wouldn't do something like that. Chapter 1067. We had a few meals together, and he said that he's the future son-in-law of the Lin family enterprise. He said that Lin Jai. Oh, you're Lin Jai. Yes, you're Lin Jai. He said that he's your boyfriend, and the two of you are already engaged, and you'll be getting married soon. He also said that as long as he asks for it, you'll definitely agree to it. He even showed me videos of him casually entering and exiting your office, your house, and the Lin family enterprise. Boyfriend. Enchanting. Lin Jia's expression stiffened slightly. Do you know his name and phone number? Of course I do, the middle-aged man replied as he took out his phone. Look, this is his phone number, right? Also, this is our call history. I've called him recently, but he hasn't picked up. Lin Jia stared at the familiar 11 digits silently. Also, I took a photo with him when we were having a meal together. Let me show you. Oh, I finally found it. Look. I didn't lie to you, did I? The quality of the photo wasn't too good, but Lin Jia was still able to recognize that it was Enchanting. Boss Lin, can you tell me something? Is he your boyfriend? Were you the one who signed the contract with me back then? Lin Jia shifted her gaze away from the middle-aged man's phone. Yes, he's my boyfriend, but I didn't sign the contract with you. After saying those words, Lin Jia shot her assistant a look, and the assistant immediately brought over a folder and opened it before the middle-aged man. Sir, take a look. The contracts of our Lin conglomerate are all stamped with such a seal, and the seal you have is completely different from ours. It's clear that it's a fake. Also, this project isn't managed by our manager Lin but manager Lin's aunt. She doesn't have the authority to sign such a contract, so these are all proof. So, I've been scammed. I've been scammed just like that. You're his girlfriend, aren't you going to do anything about it? The middle-aged man asked anxiously. Don't worry, I'll do something about it. However, the person who took your money will be the one to return it to you, Lin Jia quickly spoke up to console the middle-aged man. But what if he refuses to return it to me? What if he can't fork out the money? My employees are still waiting for me to pay them. You don't have to worry about that. Lin Jia said as she pulled open the drawer and took out the oversized diamond ring. Give me a few days. If he doesn't return your money by then, I'll give you this diamond ring so that you can sell it. Don't worry, this diamond ring is definitely worth 500,000 renminbi. If you want to sell it quickly, trust me, it won't be a problem to sell it for 1,000,000 RMB. As Lin Jia spoke, she glanced at her assistant and said, Give this gentleman his contact details. The assistant handed a business card to the middle-aged man. You can call me at any time to ask about the progress of this matter. Don't worry, Boss Lin said that he would help you manage it, so he will. The middle-aged man took the name card from Lin Jia's assistant and took a look at the number written on it. After which, he picked up his phone and made a call. Seeing that the screen of Lin Jia's assistant's phone really lit up, he finally heaved a sigh of relief. "All right then. Since that's the case, I'll trust you and wait for your news at home." Lin Jia replied with a smile, "All right." Then, she gestured for her assistant to escort the middle-aged man out. Lin Jia couldn't help but find the entire situation inconceivable. Her impression of Enchanting was that of a noble and virtuous person. How could he possibly do something so despicable? While Lin Jia was still in a daze, the door to the office was pushed open. The assistant who had escorted the middle-aged man out had returned. Lin Jia raised her head to look at her assistant before saying, "I want you to look into Enchanting's recent situation in Beijing as soon as possible." "Yes." Lin Jia was just about to get up and head to the dinner when she suddenly recalled the woman who had called Enchanting earlier in the morning. "So," she said, "right, there's also this phone number. Remember it and find a time to give her a call. Ask her what kind of relationship she has with Enchanting." Chapter 1068. Right, remember this phone number. Find a time to give her a call and ask her what kind of relationship she has with Enchanting. As the assistant listened to Lin Jia recite the numbers, she quickly took out her phone to record it down. "Miss Lin, I've memorized it. Is there anything else?" Lin Jia shook her head. Then, as if suddenly recalling something, she instructed, "Right, don't tell anyone about the contents of my conversation with that gentleman in the office today. Also, I want you to carry out the tasks I've entrusted you with discreetly. Don't let anyone else know about it." "I understand, Miss Lin." After replying to Lin Jia's words, the assistant noticed that Lin Jia was leaning back in her chair silently, so she asked, "Miss Lin, if there's nothing else, we should hurry up and set off, or else we won't be able to make it for the dinner." As if she hadn't heard her assistant's words, Lin Jia simply stared at the empty space in front of her with a contemplative look. The assistant moved her lips once more, preparing to remind Lin Jia further, but before she could say a single word, Lin Jia suddenly raised her eyes and glanced at her. "Let's go." After saying those words, Lin Jia stood up, and as if nothing had happened, she walked out of the office in her high heels. The weather grew colder and colder with each passing day. At the end of November, Beijing welcomed its first snow of the winter season. It was a Saturday, the day that the auntie had her day off. In the morning, when she checked the inventory in the house, she realized that most of the items were almost used up. In the afternoon, after Kiki woke up from her nap, Ling Wan brought Kiki out for a shopping spree. Just a casual stroll through the nearby supermarket took 2 to 3 hours. By the time Ling Wan and Kiki came out of the supermarket, it was already snowing heavily. Even though the supermarket wasn't too far away from home, Ling Wan still flagged down a taxi due to the heavy snowfall. It didn't take long for them to arrive at their home. After paying the fare, Ling Wan carried Coco out of the car. Then, she opened the trunk and took out 3 large bags. With Kiki in her arms, it was impossible for Ling Wan to carry the bags into the building. So, after the taxi left, Ling Wan placed Kiki down and said, "Kiki, walk by yourself. Mommy will carry the bags, all right?" Coco nodded her head obediently. Following Ling Wan's movements, she slid out of Ling Wan's embrace and onto the ground. Ling Wan was carrying 2 shopping bags in one hand and one in the other. As they had bought quite a lot of daily necessities, they were a little heavy, so it was a little strenuous for her to carry them. When Kiki saw this, she quickly circled around Ling Wan before picking up a bag of diapers. "Mommy, let me help you. Kiki is such a good girl." Ling Wan praised Kiki before leading her into the building. However, before they could take 2 steps, a black car suddenly stopped in front of them. Before Leng Yuan could react, Kiki had already tossed the diapers in her arms onto the ground and rushed to the car. "Daddy, Daddy." As soon as Coco said those words, the door to the driver's seat opened, and Lu Benlai stepped out. Leng Yuan was about to ask Kiki to pick up the diaper on the floor, but when she saw Lu Benlai, her words suddenly froze in her mouth. Chapter 1069. Following which, Lu Benlai picked up the diapers that Kiki had left behind and walked over to Leng Yuan. He glanced at the 3 shopping bags in her hands before reaching out to take 2 of them. "I'll send you upstairs." After saying that, he turned around and walked into the building with big strides. Leng Yuan froze on the spot. It was only when Kiki, who was in Lu Benlai's arms, saw that she wasn't moving and called out, "Mommy," that she snapped out of her daze and followed behind. There were only the 3 of them in the elevator. Kiki chatted with Lu Benlai, and Lu Benlai replied to her good-naturedly, but Leng Yuan didn't say a word. When they reached their floor, Lu Benlai waited for Leng Yuan to open the door, but he didn't enter. Instead, he placed the shopping bags by the door and placed Kiki down. "I'll be leaving first. I won't disturb you anymore." After saying those words to Leng Yuan, Lu Benlai glanced at Kiki and stroked her head. "Goodbye, Kiki." After which, he stood up and prepared to leave. Lu Benlai had been busy with work for the past few days, and every time he came to Leng Yuan's place, it would be late at night. Kiki didn't have the chance to come down to play with him. It wasn't easy for her to meet him, but seeing that he was about to leave, she immediately pounced forward and hugged Lu Benlai's leg tightly. With reddened eyes, she cried out, "Daddy, don't go. Daddy, accompany Kiki. How about I play with you another day? Daddy has something on today." Lu Benlai's heart ached for Kiki, but he didn't want to make things difficult for Leng Yuan, so he squatted down and coaxed Kiki. "No, I want Daddy to accompany Kiki today. Kiki misses Daddy." Seeing that Lu Benlai had rejected her, Kiki burst into tears. As she cried, she turned to look at Leng Yuan pitifully. "Mommy, I want Daddy to accompany me. I want Daddy to accompany me. Kiki, listen to Daddy." Lu Benlai tried to persuade Kiki, but before he could finish his words, Leng Yuan had already interjected, "Come in." After saying those words, Leng Yuan picked up the 3 shopping bags on the floor and entered the kitchen without looking at Kiki. Leng Yuan had been tidying up the kitchen the entire time. Even though she had closed the door, she could still hear Kiki's cheerful laughter. After she sorted out the things she bought and put them in the cabinet, she glanced at the time. It was almost time for dinner, so she didn't leave the kitchen. Instead, she started to prepare dinner. By the time she finished preparing dinner, it was already 6:30 p.m. After switching off the exhaust fan, Leng Yuan realized that it was a little quiet outside. She pulled open the kitchen door, and before she could walk out, she saw an adult and a child sitting on the sofa in the living room. Kiki was watching a cartoon in Lu Benlai's embrace, and Lu Benlai had something urgent. It was actually a rather ordinary scene, but for some reason, it moved Leng Yuan's heart. She stared at the adult and child on the sofa, and unknowingly, her mind wandered off. After hanging up the call, Lu Benlai subconsciously glanced toward the kitchen, and when he saw Leng Yuan standing at the entrance, he instinctively hugged Kiki and stood up. Leng. Lin, his action, Leng. Len. Chapter 1070. Not too long later, Leng Yuan walked out of the kitchen with a plate of food in her hands. She glanced at Lu Benlai, only to see that he was still standing by the sofa with Kiki in his arms. Thus, she said, "Kiki, wash your hands. Come and eat." Hearing those words, Lu Benlai snapped out of his daze. By the time he turned his gaze back to Leng Yuan, she had already returned to the kitchen. He knew that even though Leng Yuan was calling Kiki, her words were directed at him. He really did not expect that she would let him into her house, let him stay for dinner, and even talk to him. Suppressing the agitation in his heart, Lu Benlai carried Kiki into the washroom. By the time he finished washing Kiki's hands and brought her out of the bathroom, Leng Yuan had already placed the dishes on the table. Lu Benlai first placed Kiki on the chair she was sitting on before taking a seat beside her. Leng Yuan didn't speak to him, but a bowl of soup was placed in front of him. Although he didn't drink the soup, looking at the ingredients made him think back to 4 years ago. When he returned home from work, he always saw the same soup on the dining table. "Daddy, hey." Seeing that Lu Benlai wasn't moving at all, Zhang Xian reached out to grab the latter's collar. Recovering from his daze, Lu Benlai picked up Kiki's bowl and spoon and began feeding her. Since Lu Benlai was the one feeding her, Kiki wasn't like the auntie who fed her in the past, eating and playing at the same time. So, it didn't take long for Kiki to be full. "Let Dad eat. Can you go play by yourself for a while?" Leng Yuan glanced at Lu Benlai's untouched chopsticks, then carried the clingy Kiki out of her chair and said, "Let Daddy eat. Daddy." Hearing those 2 words coming out of Leng Yuan's mouth, Lu Benlai's fingers subconsciously trembled. Coco nodded obediently. "Okay." Then, he turned to look at Lu Benlai, and seeing that the latter hadn't eaten yet, he said, "Daddy, it's time to eat." Hearing Kiki's words, Lu Benlai recovered from his daze and replied with a "all right" before picking up his chopsticks. But as soon as Lu Benlai picked up his chopsticks, he ran off to watch a cartoon by himself. At the dining table, only Leng Yuan and Lu Benlai were left. Neither of them spoke to the other. The taste of the food was still the same. Even after so many years, nothing had changed. As Lu Benlai continued eating, he suddenly felt a lump in his throat, making it hard for him to swallow. If only he hadn't lost her, how good would that have been? With such thoughts in mind, he turned to look at Leng Yuan, who was seated beside him, and subconsciously moved his lips. "Yuan Yuan." He had only said those 2 words, but Leng Yuan seemed to know what he was going to say next. She raised her head to look at him and said, "The soup is already cold. I'll go heat it up for you." As she spoke, she stood up, took the bowl of soup in front of him, and entered the kitchen. Lu Benlai knew that Leng Yuan had guessed what he was going to say, so she interrupted him. He didn't insist on talking to her anymore. After she heated the soup and came out, he pretended as if nothing had happened and silently ate his meal. On the other hand, Leng Yuan seemed to have been startled. She didn't return to the dining table. Instead, after placing down the bowl of soup, she went over to the sofa to accompany Kiki. Even though it was the weekend, Lin Jiayi still received a call in the afternoon asking for an urgent document, so she had her assistant rush it over. Chapter 1071. By the time the assistant changed into slippers and rushed into the study with the documents in hand, Lin Jiayi heard some movement and gestured for her to sit on the sofa by the side for a moment before continuing typing furiously on her laptop. Roughly 10 minutes later, Lin Jiayi was finally done with her work. She raised her head to look at her assistant and asked, "Have you brought the documents?" The assistant hurriedly stood up and passed the documents over to her. "Is this the one?" Lin Jiayi didn't say a word. She tore open the folder, took out the documents inside, and browsed through them briefly before nodding. "That's right, it's this one. Thank you for your hard work." "It's fine," the assistant replied before standing in Lin Jiayi's study, showing no signs of leaving. Usually, the assistant would take the initiative to leave after she was done with her work, but this time, she didn't leave at all. Lin Jiayi couldn't help but raise her head to look at her curiously. "Is there anything wrong?" The assistant moved her lips, but she didn't say a word. After confirming that there was really something wrong, Lin Jai put down the documents in her hands and asked, "What's wrong? Speak." The assistant seemed to find it hard to speak. She moved her lips several times, but no words came out. Lin Jai chuckled. "You don't often act like this. If there's anything, just say it." "It's fine. It's not like that, Boss Lin. It's. The assistant stuttered for a moment before finally gritting her teeth and saying, "It's the matter that you asked me to investigate, and I have some results." Lin Jai was taken aback. It took her a moment before she realized what she had asked her assistant to investigate. She nodded lightly and said, "All right, go ahead." The assistant fell silent once more. Lin Jai could guess what the assistant was thinking, so she said, "You don't have to be like that. Since I'm the one who asked you to investigate, I'm willing to listen to whatever the results are. Feel free to speak your mind." "All right, I'll speak then." After asking the question, Lin Jai shot him an encouraging look before speaking up. "Everything that the man who caused a ruckus in our company has said is true. Mr. Qin really used your name to scam him of 500,000 renminbi. Mr. Qin not only cheated this person, but he also cheated other companies. He cheated them all because he was your boyfriend and soon to be your fiancé. The accumulated money is almost 3 million yuan. One of the companies declared bankruptcy because he cheated them of 800,000 yuan. The boss asked Mr. Qin for money, but Mr. Qin found some gangsters to threaten him. In addition, when Mr. Qin talks to others about business and cooperation, he will mention your name. Many times, when he meets with clients, the reason why he brings you with him is to make it easier for him to reach cooperation. It was President Chen who told me that he didn't want to cooperate with Mr. Qin, but Mr. Qin threatened him, saying that if he didn't cooperate with him, he would also stop the cooperation between Lin's enterprise and him. Mr. Qin often gambles and owes a lot of gambling debts. However, no one is chasing him because of you." At this point, the assistant paused to observe Lin Jai's expression. Seeing that she was still calm, she continued, "Other than that, I've already dialed the number that you asked me to. I didn't reveal our identity, but I've already gotten a rough idea of the situation on the other side. The owner of that number is Song Ying, a Shanghai native. She's the daughter of a small company, as well as Mr. Qin's wife." Chapter 1072. The caller's name is Song Ying. She's from Shanghai, and she's the daughter of a small company. She's also Mr. Qin's wife. Mr. Qin's wife. After saying those words, the assistant subconsciously assessed Lin Jai from head to toe. Her young and pretty face didn't reveal much emotion, but her fingertips, which were resting on the table, visibly trembled. Her boyfriend, who had proposed to her, had already married someone else. No one would be able to accept this, right? The assistant didn't know whether she should continue speaking or not. The study was silent for a moment before Lin Jai raised her head and glanced at her assistant. Her voice was calm and emotionless, and then. It was rare for the assistant to see Lin Jai in such a state, and she was so frightened that she didn't dare to speak anymore. Lin Jai frowned when she didn't hear anything else. Before Lin Jai could say anything, the assistant hurriedly said, "Mr. Qin has been married to Miss Song for 10 years. According to Miss Song, 11 years ago, when Mr. Qin was still studying in the United States, he met her on a blind date. After that, Mr. Qin pursued her. 1 year later, they got married. After their blind date, Mr. Qin never returned to the United States. In other words, he gave up on his studies in the United States. Miss Song said that Mr. Qin has always been good to her, and he took great care of her after their marriage. He would give her a small gift every 3 days and a big surprise every half a month. Miss Song also said that she was very satisfied and happy with her marriage. In the 3rd year of their marriage, Miss Song got pregnant. But unfortunately, due to her constitution, she suffered a natural miscarriage less than 3 months into the pregnancy. From then on, Miss Song's body became a little frail, and the doctor said that it would be difficult for her to conceive again. However, Mr. Chin didn't despise her because of this. This marriage lasted for 9 years, and in these 9 years, they rarely quarreled. Miss Song's father was getting on in years, and seeing that Mr. Chin treated Miss Song well, he handed over the family business to Mr. Chin in the 7th year of their marriage. In the first 2 years, Mr. Chin treated Miss Song very well, but in the 9th year of their marriage, due to Mr. Chin's mistake, the company suffered heavy losses. Miss Song's father even gave Mr. Chin a huge pension, but it didn't solve the problem. From then on, Miss Song said that Mr. Chin spent less and less time at home, and he didn't treat her as well as before. Chapter 1073. Miss Song said that it has been almost 3 to 4 months since she last met Mr. Chin. When Miss Song called me to tell me about this, she was crying her heart out. She even asked me if I knew Mr. Chin and if I could find a way for her to meet him. At this point, the assistant couldn't help but speak up for Miss Song. I really think that Miss Song is quite pitiful. She told me that because of Mr. Chin, her hair was falling out in clumps, and her father was so angry that he was admitted to the hospital. Miss Song even said that most of the jewelry and watches that she bought at home were taken away and sold by Mr. Chin. Lin Jia remained silent, showing no intention of saying anything. Realizing that she had spoken too much, the assistant fell silent. A moment later, as if recalling something, she suddenly spoke up, "Right, there's one more thing, that Boss Lin, Miss Song told me that Mr. Chin has never suffered from amnesia, and he has never been involved in any accidents. His name was on the list of those who were involved in the accident, but he wasn't in the car because he was already in China at the time." Miss Song also said that she knew that Mr. Chin had a girlfriend in America, but she didn't know much about it. Mr. Chin was the one who told her about the girlfriend, and he said that the girlfriend was just an ordinary girl from an ordinary family, so he didn't have any special feelings for her. It was just that they were both Chinese, so he felt a sense of closeness there. He said that the girlfriend was the one who took the initiative to court him, so she probably thought that he was no longer in this world. Mr. Chin also said that it's a good thing that he didn't leave any lingering memories for the girl, so she could think that he was dead and start a new life. The assistant wasn't aware of the history between Lin Jia and Qin Ting, so she habitually commented, "It seems like there's really something wrong with Mr. Chin. He even lied to his first ex-girlfriend." As soon as the assistant said those words, a document on the desk suddenly fell to the ground. The assistant immediately shut his mouth and turned to Lin Jia. At some point in time, Lin Jia had taken out an old silver ring from somewhere and was staring at it intently. She didn't realize that she had accidentally dropped a document onto the ground. The assistant walked up and bent down to pick up the document before placing it on the desk. "Boss Lin." Before she could say anything, Lin Jia abruptly hid the ring away, as if she had been frightened by something. But very quickly, Lin Jia didn't seem to be in a hurry anymore. She turned her head to look at her assistant and nodded calmly. "I understand. If there's nothing else, you should head back early." The assistant replied with an "oh," before standing in front of the desk and looking at Lin Jia worriedly. It took a while before Lin Jia realized that Luo Ruoxin was still around, and she shot a perplexed look at her. The assistant finally spoke. Lin, but before she could finish her words, Lin Jia had already guessed what she was going to say, and she interjected, "Don't worry, I'm fine." The assistant was speechless. She hesitated for a moment and said, then, "Mr. Lin, I'll be leaving first. If you need anything, feel free to call me." Lins, she. Chapter 1074. As the door to the study was closed, Lin Jai suddenly felt that the surroundings around her had fallen silent. The assistant had told her a lot of things, and she had actually heard them all in her mind and remembered them in her heart, but she just couldn't understand what the assistant's words meant. She had no idea how long she had been sitting at her desk, but she couldn't help but feel a little stuffy. She wanted to go out for some fresh air, but by the time she came back to her senses, she was already on the streets. She didn't wear a coat, and she didn't change out of her shoes either. All she had on her was her phone. The winter night was very cold outside, but at this moment, she inexplicably liked this kind of howling bone-chilling wind. It could make her more clear-headed, and it could also make her face the truth more rationally. She thought that she might have walked aimlessly on the streets for too long after leaving home, so her feet were starting to hurt. She didn't feel like walking anymore, so she found a random seat by the roadside and sat down. She thought about it seriously for a while and remembered that when she left the house, she had changed the password because Enchanting knew it. Then, when she was in the elevator, she had blocked Enchanting's phone number. When she reached the first floor, she told the receptionist on duty to stop Enchanting outside the building and not let him into the elevator if he ever came again. She wasn't wrong, this was her style. She wasn't a person who liked to drag things out, and indecisiveness wasn't in her nature either. Enchanting was already in such a state, so if she didn't make a swift decision, would she be able to live through the new year? In truth, she didn't feel that bad when he used her name to scam people in Beijing. He was married for 10 years, and he had a wife named Song Ying. She didn't feel that bad either. When he reunited with her, he thought that she was a good person, so he wanted to hug her, so he abandoned his wife. She didn't feel that bad either. But when he told his wife about their time in the United States, he treated it as a story of the past. He even said that he had never lost his memory, and that his accident was just a play that he directed. Yet, it still made her feel terrible. He didn't know her background, and yet he still wanted to soar to the top. Sure. He should have told her that she, Lin Jai, had never lacked a backbone. If he didn't love her, she would have let him go without any hesitation. Yet, he actually faked his death to escape from her, leaving her with a love that she thought to be a beautiful one that she guarded with all her heart for 11 years. 11 years, from the age of 19 to 30, a woman's best years in youth, had been spent on him, and the result? In the end, the outcome was that her sincerity had been fed to the dogs. As for the question of whether it was worth it or not, she really didn't want to pursue it. Since things had already come to this, she had chosen the path, and she had no complaints. The only thing that she couldn't accept was that the beautiful dream she had when she was young was really just a dream. Some people. What they feared the most was a sudden death, because once they died, the only thing they would remember was the good. Perhaps, Enchanting really wasn't that good after all. It was his death and her sudden loss that made her endlessly beautify him in her mind. Eventually, he became the white moonlight in her heart, the white moonlight that no one could surpass. Did she love him? Did she really love him? Chapter 1075. Even though she knew that it wasn't worth it for her to feel sad for Enchanting, she still couldn't help but feel sad. How could she not feel sad? The person she cared about the most for so many years, the thing she cared about the most, had all turned into a joke in the end. Just the thought of it was too much for her to accept. Lin Jai raised her head to look at the sky. As much as she felt sad, as much as she couldn't accept it, she couldn't allow herself to shed a single tear for him. As the word tears crossed her mind, she remembered the tears she had shed for him every year on the anniversary of his death, all those years she had thought he was dead. Bloody hell. If not for the fact that murder was against the law, she would have really wished for that day to be the anniversary of his death. Only then would she be worthy of those tears she had shed for him. But it didn't matter. Tonight, she would feel sad if she had to, and after tonight, she would find a way to make him return all the tears she had shed for him. With such thoughts in mind, Lin Jiayi stood up and took a deep breath before continuing down the street. When she finally arrived at a bar that she was familiar with, Lin Jiayi stepped in. The owner of the bar recognized Lin Jiayi, and before Lin Jiayi could even order, he had already served the best wine in his bar to Lin Jiayi. Lin Jiayi took the wine bottle and poured herself a cup of wine. Facing the empty space in front of her, she said, "This cup of wine is to the 18 of us." After saying those words, Lin Jiayi gulped down the entire cup of wine. Putting down the cup heavily, Lin Jiayi poured herself another cup of wine and raised her cup to the empty space in front of her once more. "This cup of wine is to the broken hearts, the tears, and the drunken wine I've drunk for you all those years ago." Lin Jiayi still gulped down the entire cup of wine without missing a single drop. "The third cup. This cup of wine is to the white moonlight that I loved so deeply all those years ago. The fourth cup. This cup of wine is to the heavens for our reunion once more. If not for this reunion, I'm afraid that I would still be foolishly, stubbornly, holding on to that joke for a long time. The fifth cup, the sixth cup, the seventh cup." By the time she reached the 15th cup, Lin Jiayi's words were already slurring. In fact, she couldn't even remember how many times she had counted. "This cup of wine is to a scumbag like you. Hurry up and die. Happy 10th anniversary with this glass of wine. Ha ha ha. How do you think this kind of person can get a wife? The person who married him, was she a fool? Oh. I'm also a fool. All right. This cup of wine, a toast to me, a fool. Indeed. Lin Jiayi, you're a fool. No, I mean, Xie Shangzhou is a fool. Ah, that's not right either. What does this have to do with the GPS? But, you're right, the GPS is pretty stupid." Lin Jiayi muttered under her breath as she poured another cup of wine. "Ha, if I were to toast the navigator with this cup of wine, I'd be a fool, and a big fool at that. This cup of wine is for the moonlight, for the morning sun, for freedom, for love. This last cup of wine, to tomorrow. Tomorrow will be even better. Yes, that's right. Tomorrow will be better." As Lin Jiayi said those words, she slumped onto the table, completely motionless. "Miss Lin. Miss Lin." The owner of the bar walked up to her and called her name a few times. Seeing that she didn't respond, he thought about Xie Shangzhou, who used to accompany her here often. He pulled out his phone and called Xie Shangzhou. Chapter 1076. After resigning from the Lin family, Xie Shangzhou had visited the bar a few times. So, as soon as the owner of the bar reported his attendance, Xie Shangzhou immediately responded, "I know. May I know what's the matter?" "It's like this, Mr. Xia. Your boss is drunk right now. Is it convenient for you now? Can you come over and pick her up?" "Boss?" Xie Shangzhou subconsciously asked. But before the owner of the bar could reply, he suddenly realized something and asked, "Boss Lin?" "Yes, it's Miss Lin. There are more and more customers here, so it's a little inconvenient for me to take care of her. Besides, she's alone, and I'm afraid that something might go wrong, so..." Before the owner of the bar could finish his words, Xie Shangzhou had already interjected, "I understand. Help me take care of her for half." "No, 15 minutes will do. I'll be there right away." "No problem. 15 minutes is fine. Besides, Miss Lin can be considered as half a friend of mine, thank you. I'll see you later then." "See you later." As soon as the owner of the bar said those words, Xie Shangzhou hung up the call. The owner of the bar leaned over to Lin Jai and called her a few times, hoping to wake her up and have her rest in the lounge at the back. However, there was no response from her at all, so he called for a waiter to help keep an eye on Lin Jai before heading back to the bar counter to continue mixing drinks. In truth, it had only been 10 minutes since the door of the bar was pushed open, and the travel-worn Xia Shangzhou barged in. Mr. Xia. Hearing the commotion, the owner of the bar raised his head to look at the door and instinctively greeted him. But before he could finish his words, Xia Shangzhou had already rushed up to him and asked, "Where is she?" Before the owner of the bar could point her out to Xia Shangzhou had already scanned the surroundings before his eyes finally fell on Lin Jai, who was seated by the window. "I'll go take a look at her first," Xia Shangzhou said as he began walking toward Lin Jai. "Boss Lin. Boss Lin." Xia Shangzhou called out to Lin Jai several times, but there was no response from her at all. Damn, he was really drunk to the point of unconsciousness. With such thoughts in mind, Xia Shangzhou glanced at the table and saw that it was filled with empty bottles. A deep frown appeared on his forehead. Did she drink all of this? Why did she drink so much? Even before she met Qin Ting, she had never drunk herself to this extent on the anniversary of Qin Ting's death. Boss Lin. Boss Lin. He tried calling out to Lin Jai a few more times, but she was still slumped over the table, not moving at all. Thus, he turned around and walked back to the bar counter. He turned to the owner of the bar and asked, "How much is it?" "I'll give you the bill first." The bar owner handed Xia Shangzhou a bill. Xia Shangzhou took out his wallet and looked at the amount. Suddenly, he froze in the middle of taking out his card. In just a few seconds, he stuffed his wallet back into his pocket. "Can I use WeChat?" "Sure." Hearing the owner's reply, Xia Shangzhou sent a message to Liu Benlai. It didn't take long for Liu Benlai to send him a message. It was a transaction record, and after receiving it, Xia Shangzhou passed his phone over to the owner of the bar to settle the bill. Chapter 1077. By the roadside, Xia Shangzhou flagged down a taxi and carried Lin Jai into the car. After reporting Lin Jai's home address to the driver, he realized that Lin Jai had run out of her house in her home clothes. She was only wearing slippers, and she didn't even have a thick coat on. Lin Jai had always been a beauty freak. Even if it was just a simple trip to the supermarket to buy something, she would still choose a beautiful outfit before she would leave the house. What was wrong with her today? Even though Lin Jai was so drunk that Xia Shangzhou had no idea what was going on, he couldn't help but worry for her. She must have met with something really upsetting, right? It shouldn't be something related to work. After all, if it was something related to work, it had to be something really troublesome for her. His former colleagues would surely tell him about it. And for her, it shouldn't be something related to her personal life either. So, the only thing left was her relationship with Qin Ting. Did something happen between her and Qin Ting? Indeed, only Qin Ting would make her sad, heartbroken, and drunk. With such thoughts in mind, Xia Shangzhou couldn't help but feel a little sour in his heart. Soon, they arrived at Lin Jai's apartment. After alighting from the taxi with Lin Jai in his arms, Xia Shangzhou quickly rushed into the elevator and headed upstairs. When they arrived at Lin Jai's house, Xia Shangzhou placed Lin Jai on the ground and entered the passcode with one hand. Her passcode was her birthday. He had memorized it by heart, but no matter how many times he tried, he couldn't get the passcode correct. Did Lin Jai change her passcode? Xia Shangzhou tried again, but the passcode was still incorrect. Left with no choice, he tried waking Lin Jai up, but Lin Jai was leaning unsteadily on his shoulder, not knowing who he was or what he was talking about. Eventually, Xia Shangzhou tried searching for Lin Jai's house key, only to realize that she didn't even bring her bag out. It seemed like he wouldn't be able to enter her house. But he couldn't send her to the Lin family mansion either. If the people there saw her drunk like this, they would surely reprimand her the next day. She couldn't go to the hotel either. She didn't even have her identity card with her, so she couldn't stay there even if she wanted to. After a moment of contemplation, Xie Shangzhou could only carry Lin Jai back down the stairs, hail a cab, and bring her back to his home. His home was no longer the house he used to rent, but the small apartment he bought with a loan 2 years ago. It was renovated at the beginning of the year and had been there for half a year. He just moved in last month. Upon arriving at the entrance of his house, Xie Shangzhou took out his keys and opened the door. After which, he carried Lin Jai in and placed her on the sofa before walking to the door and closing it. After which, he opened the shoe cabinet and rummaged through it for a long time before he finally found a pair of slippers that he hadn't worn before. Walking over to her, he bent down and helped her change her slippers. When he changed her shoes, his fingertips touched the tips of her feet, and he found that it was bone-chilling. He picked up her slippers and squatted in front of her for a while. Then he got up and went to the bathroom. Not long after, he walked over to her with a basin of steaming hot water. He knelt down again and carefully placed her feet in the basin. Chapter 1078. As he tucked her in, he heard her furrow her brows and mutter about water. He hurriedly walked to the open kitchen and made a pot of hot water. He added some mineral water to the most suitable temperature, then brought it to the bedroom and carefully fed it to her. After she finished the water, Xie Shangzhou gently laid her body flat on the bed. Just as he was about to get up and leave with the glass of water, she suddenly flipped over on the bed, reached out her arms, and wrapped them around his waist. Xie Shangzhou was so shocked that his fingers trembled and he almost knocked the glass of water to the floor. He was stunned for a while before he forced himself to calm down. Then he slowly turned his head to look at her on the bed. After drinking the water, she seemed to feel a lot more comfortable. She closed her eyes and fell into a deeper sleep. She had the habit of hugging a pillow when she slept, so he thought she probably thought of him as the fox on her bed at home. However, it wasn't the same thing for her to hug him like that. He grabbed a pillow from the side and wanted to switch places, but when he moved slightly, her brows furrowed. He was so frightened that he didn't dare move. However, it was a little uncomfortable for him to twist his body like that while she was hugging him, so he adjusted his movements to find a more comfortable position to lean against the headboard. He was comfortable, but she probably didn't feel comfortable hugging him. Her arms around his waist moved again and again, and then her head, which was lying on the pillow, suddenly leaned against his chest. Then, as though she felt comfortable in this position, her entire body became completely docile and quiet. It was very quiet in the room. The unique fragrance of her body mixed with the smell of alcohol endlessly burrowed into his nostrils. Her hair smelled the best. He didn't know what brand of shampoo she used, but it emitted a faint, almost indiscernible fragrance. Xie Shangzhou's breathing gradually became a little unsteady. He didn't dare look at her again, so he turned his head and looked at the night view outside the window. As the night slowly deepened, she fell into a deeper sleep. In the quiet space, he could clearly feel her heartbeat and her breathing. Such a scene was so illusory, yet so real. He lay in the same position for a long time, but he didn't dare move. He was afraid that if he moved, it would be like the countless dreams he had in the past, and everything would be gone. Time passed very slowly, but he especially liked this slowness. He leaned against the headboard, alternating between sleeping and waking. His heart raced and his lips broke into a smile. It wasn't until the sky turned white in the east that he slowly loosened his grip on her waist. Her head rolled off his chest and onto the pillow beside him. Losing the weight on his chest made him dazed for a moment. Then he turned his head and looked at her. She didn't show any signs of waking up, but he didn't stay there any longer. He tiptoed up, grabbed a glass of water, and left the bedroom. He lay down on the sofa and closed his eyes to catch up on sleep. After lying down for a while, he suddenly placed his hand on his chest, where she had been sleeping the whole night. At 8:00, Xie Shangzhou was woken up by his alarm. He pushed open the bedroom door and took a look inside, only to see Lin Jiayi sleeping soundly on the bed. Not waking her up, he headed straight to the bathroom to take a shower before changing into a set of clean clothes. After which, he headed out to buy breakfast. Chapter 1079. By the time he returned, he had just pushed open the door when he heard some commotion coming from the master bedroom. He quickly grabbed his slippers and prepared to head over to take a look, but before he could change into his slippers, a scream of shock sounded from the master bedroom, followed by a vulgar curse. Following which, the door to the master bedroom was abruptly flung open, and a barefooted Lin Jiayi dashed out from within. Upon seeing Xie Shangzhou standing at the door, Lin Jiayi's bristling hair immediately calmed down. "Ah! You were the one who brought me back last night." Xie Shangzhou replied with an before staring at Lin Jiayi's bare feet. "Boss Lin, my floor is very dirty." Lin Jiayi snorted coldly before returning to the master bedroom. She put on her slippers and walked out again. "Navigator, these slippers are yours, right? They're so big. But I do like the color. My head hurts. Do you have water to drink? Forget it, do you have any clothes? Lend me a set. I want to take a bath first. The stench of alcohol is really suffocating me." Following Lin Jiayi's words, a large bag was passed over to her. "Xie Shangzhou, when I went to buy breakfast earlier, I bought it from a random supermarket by the roadside. The supermarkets are only open for 24 hours at the moment, so the goods aren't that good. You should make do with this first. I'll send you home later so that you can take another bath." Lin Jiayi didn't respond to Xie Shangzhou's words. Instead, she opened the bag and saw that it was filled with toiletries and pajamas. After which, she waved at Xie Shangzhou and walked into the bathroom. After Lin Jiayi came out of the bathroom, Xie Shangzhou called her over for breakfast. Lin Jiayi seemed to be in a good mood as she walked over. Looking at the breakfast that Xie Shangzhou had placed on the table, she grabbed a dumpling with her hand and stuffed it into her mouth. As she ate, she mumbled an mm. After swallowing the dumpling, she remarked, "It's so delicious." Looking at Lin Jiayi's delighted expression, Xie Shangzhou's expression turned even more grim. She was clearly acting the same way last night, but she woke up in such a state. Was she putting on an act? Lin Jiayi didn't stand on ceremony. She pulled out a chair and sat down, then began eating her breakfast. As she ate, she noticed that Xie Shangzhou was staring at her in a daze, so she pointed to the chair and said, "What are you standing there for? Let's have breakfast." Xie Shangzhou sat down and picked up his chopsticks. After taking 2 bites, he turned to Lin Jiayi and said, "Boss Lin." Lin Jiayi looked around Xie Shangzhou's house and remarked, "You moved in. Why didn't you tell me? This house is a little small, but it's still quite cozy." The words that Xie Shangzhou was about to say were swallowed back by Lin Jiayi. "That lamp is from the shop I recommended to you. Did their boss give you a discount?" Oh, I like that desk too." "Alright, Navigator, your house is just like that one. Although it's small, it has all the essentials, Boss Lin." Xie Shangzhou finally spoke up, interrupting Lin Jiayi's evaluation of his house. Lin Jiayi quickly shut her mouth. But before Xie Shangzhou could ask any further, Lin Jiayi had already guessed what he was going to say and replied, "I'm fine. Also, Enchanting and I. To be more precise, I made a unilateral decision. We broke up." But my unilateral decision is the end. In other words, I broke up with Enchanting and will have nothing to do with her in the future. Chapter 1080. Break up. Xie Shangzhou asked in bewilderment, as if he had just heard the most unbelievable word in the world. That's right. Lin Jiayi replied firmly. A moment later, she spoke up once more, and it was hard to tell whether she was speaking to Xie Shangzhou or herself. We broke up. Broke up. She said that she broke up with Enchanting. He had already guessed last night that something might have happened between her and Enchanting, but he didn't think that it would be so serious, to the extent that they would break up. He had seen how much she liked him over the years, so for her to make such a decision, Enchanting must have done something really overboard, right? Putting Enchanting aside, she must be feeling awful at the moment, right? But that was to be expected. If she wasn't feeling awful, why would she put herself in such a pathetic state last night? To Xie Shangzhou, this was clearly a piece of good news, but he couldn't bring himself to feel the slightest bit of joy. Instead, he felt even more worried. He stared at Lin Jiayi for a moment before moving his lips once more, Lin, but before he could finish his words, Lin Jiayi had already interjected with a smile, all right, the best time of the day is morning. I don't want to talk about unhappy matters and unworthy people so early in the morning, so... Navigator, let's have breakfast and talk about something happy, all right? Just as Xie Shangzhou was about to ask Lin Jiayi what had happened, his words got stuck in his throat, and he found himself unable to speak anymore. He stared at her for a moment, but he couldn't tell if she had really let it go, or if she was trying her best to let it go, or if she was simply too deeply hurt to touch it. His worry deepened, but when he spoke up once more, he changed the topic. Sure, what do you want to talk about? Do you want to talk about my house or the breakfast before you? Either is fine. Lin Jiayi took a sip of her porridge before raising her head to look at the ceiling. The lamp on the dining table is not bad. I bought it online. Those flowers on the balcony, are they all yours? That's right, not bad. I didn't think that you would be an expert in gardening, Navigator. Before they knew it, the two of them had finished their breakfast. It was about time for Xie Shangzhou to go to work, but he wasn't in a hurry to leave. Instead, he stared at Lin Jiayi intently and asked, how do you intend to spend the day? If she guessed correctly, Enchanting would definitely go to the company or home to look for her if she couldn't get in touch with her. Therefore, she didn't really want to go to work, nor did she really want to go home. She didn't want to go back to the old mansion to listen to her family urging her to get married. Lin Jiayi pondered for a moment before asking, can I stay here with you? Yes, of course. As Xie Shangzhou spoke, he pointed at his house. My house isn't big, and I only have this much stuff. So, feel free to do whatever you want. Just treat this as your own home, thank you, Navigator. Lin Jiayi shot Xie Shangzhou a radiant smile. Xie Shangzhou blinked and looked at the nearby desk. Do you know how to use a computer? Forget it, I'll write down the password for you. If you want to use it, just use it yourself. The remote control for the TV is also on the desk, in the box next to the mouse. Chapter 1081. I might not be able to make it back for lunch, so you can order takeout. I've written down the address for you as well. If you find it troublesome, you can give me a call and tell me what you want to eat. I'll order it for you, he added another line of words beneath the number. After putting down his pen, he was intending to head to work, but as soon as he walked over to the sofa, before he could even tidy up his documents, he suddenly remembered that other than her phone, she didn't have anything else with her. So, he turned to Lin Jiayi and asked, is there anything you need? There's no hurry, you can take your time to think about it. Send it to my WeChat, and I'll buy it for you when I get back from work tonight. Also, recalling that Lin Jiayi didn't have her wallet with her, the navigator realized that she probably didn't have much change on her. While it was convenient to use her phone to pay for things outside, it was still safer to have some money on hand. Thus, he took out his wallet and took out a few red notes. He walked over to the dining table and placed them before Lin Jie. "Take this money. If you're bored at home, you might need it when you head out." After saying all that he needed to say, Xie Shangzhou confirmed that there was nothing else he wanted to say, so he said, "I'll be heading to work first. If you're feeling sleepy, you should catch up on your sleep." While Zhang Xian was chattering away, Lin Jie had been staring at him silently the entire time. However, upon hearing those words, she looked at him with a smile on her face and nodded her head lightly. Xie Shangzhou was still worried, and he was just about to nag a little more when he saw Lin Jie's gentle expression, and those words died in his throat. Looking at her smiling face, he fell silent for a moment before finally saying, "I'll be leaving now." Then, he turned around and left the house. It was a long time after the door closed that Lin Jie finally came back to her senses. She slowly lowered her gaze and looked at the few notes he had left on the table. Ever since she was young, other than her grandfather, her father, and the ATM, there had never been a man who gave her money to spend. The navigator was the first. But then again, the navigator was really too stingy to only give her 500 renminbi. With such thoughts in mind, Lin Jie picked up the 500 renminbi note and waved it in front of her face before stuffing it into the pocket of her pajamas. This seemed to be the first man's money she had ever asked for, aside from her grandfather, father, and ATM machines. It just so happened that Lin Jie was wrapping up all of her work recently, so it didn't really matter if she wasn't in the company. She called her assistant and told her that she wouldn't be going to the company for the next few days. She also told her assistant not to tell anyone about her whereabouts. She also told her to contact her if there was anything. After hanging up, she completely forgot about work and Enchanting. She stayed in Xie Shangzhou's house, playing games, watching TV, scrolling through Weibo, and watching live broadcasts. Unknowingly, the entire morning had passed. When she picked up the phone that had run out of battery and was charging on Xie Shangzhou's desk, she saw that Xie Shangzhou had sent her a WeChat message. In the hour that she was not looking at her phone, Xie Shangzhou had sent her several messages. "What are you doing? Why aren't you talking? It's almost noon. What do you want to eat?" Chapter 1082. Even though Xie Shangzhou didn't ask about what had happened between her and Enchanting, nor did he console her, Lin Jie knew that the reason why Xie Shangzhou would send her a message every once in a while was because he was worried about her. Was she really getting old? Was she getting old? She suddenly realized that the navigator's actions were far more romantic than the way Enchanting chased after her in the United States. It was just like that morning when she told him that she wanted to stay at his place, and before he left, he had told her those bits and pieces. Back then, when she looked at his silhouette and listened to his voice, she couldn't help but feel a sense of warmth and comfort. While Lin Jie was in a daze, her phone suddenly rang. She snapped out of her daze and glanced at the screen. It was a call from Xie Shangzhou. She picked up the call, but before she could say a word, she heard his anxious voice through the phone, "Boss Lin, are you all right?" "I'm fine." Lin Jie couldn't help but think that she was acting like a coquettish little girl. To think that she would actually feel like crying upon hearing the navigator's words. This really wasn't in line with her persona. "Oh, I saw that you weren't replying to my message, so I thought that you..." Before Xie Shangzhou could finish his words, Lin Jie had already interjected, "I was watching a live stream when my phone ran out of battery, so I placed it by the side to charge it up. After that, I went to watch a movie, so I didn't pay much attention to my phone. I was just about to pick up my phone to reply to your message when you suddenly called me. Oh. Xie Shangzhou nodded a few times before his tone visibly relaxed. Have you had lunch yet? Do you want me to go back? There's no need for that. I'm not hungry at the moment. I'll order something to eat when I'm hungry. You should get back to work. All right then. Give me a call if you need anything. Got it. Lin Jiayi stayed at Xie Shangzhou's place for an entire week. In this week, she didn't go to the office, and she didn't return home either. In the past week, she had received 20 calls from her assistant. Half of the calls were about Enchanting looking for her again. Her assistant had also suggested to her that she should lay her cards on the table with Enchanting as soon as possible, but without even thinking about it, she rejected her assistant's suggestion. Back then, Enchanting had lied to her for 10 years, and it had only been a few days since then, and yet, he was already thinking of freeing Enchanting. Lin Jiayi wasn't an easygoing person. She didn't want Enchanting to know that she knew all of his trump cards, so she intentionally left him hanging so that he would think that there was still hope for her. Over the past week, Lin Jiayi had even gone to the market to buy some groceries. They were all her favorites, and of course, Xie Shangzhou had prepared them for her after he got off work. Over the past week, Lin Jiayi had been trying to clean up Xie Shangzhou's home, but in the end, she accidentally broke one of his ornaments. Over the past week, Lin Jiayi had also tried to wash Xie Shangzhou's clothes, but in the end, she failed to separate his underwear, shirt, and pants. Over the past week, on a whim, Lin Jiayi had even made a dinner for him. She had followed the steps on the internet to make it, and while it looked passable, the taste was rather average. She didn't eat a single bite, but Xie Shangzhou seemed to be enjoying it very much. Chapter 1083. She couldn't help but think that emotions were truly a mysterious thing. It wasn't too long ago that she was deeply in love with him, but in the blink of an eye, all of that love had vanished without a trace. It was a brand new week. On Monday afternoon, while Lin Jiayi was on her lunch break, she was woken up by a call from her assistant. She was a little displeased that her dreams had been disrupted, so she picked up the call and heard that it was news regarding Enchanting once more. She felt even more vexed. Boss Lin, Mr. Chen has come to the company to look for you again. This time, he's different from before. He's causing a huge commotion. Her assistant called her over a video call, and as soon as she finished speaking, the image on the screen changed from her assistant's face to that of the lobby of the first floor of the Lin family enterprise. All she could see were roses and pink balloons. It was a very romantic scene. Dressed in a suit, Enchanting stood amidst the sea of flowers, shouting, "Lin Jiayi, I love you." If one didn't know about the things he had done behind the scenes, just from his appearance alone, one would think that he was infatuated. "Look, Boss Lin. What should we do now? Many people in the company have come downstairs to take a look. It won't be good for him to continue causing a ruckus like this, right?" Ignoring her assistant's words, Lin Jiayi continued staring at Enchanting on the screen, and for some reason, she couldn't help but think of the navigator. She used to think that Enchanting was really dashing and charming, but now... Why did she feel that the navigator frying an egg in the kitchen with an apron wrapped around his waist was even more pleasing to the eye and more manly? "Lin Jiayi, I don't know why you've suddenly ignored me. I think that I might have done something wrong, so I'll apologize to you right here. I hope that you can give me a chance so that I can become better. Lin Jiayi, I know that you'll be able to see this scene, so I'm here today to express my determination to you. I'll be standing right here, waiting for you to appear." She was clearly the female lead in the video, but Lin Jiayi seemed to be enjoying it as if she was watching a drama. "Boss Lin. Boss Lin." Her assistant's voice interrupted Lin Jiayi's excitement. "Ignore him. Let him shout if he wants to." As she spoke, Lin Jiayi yawned and said, "I'm really tired, so I'm going back to sleep." If it's because he's causing trouble in the company again, you don't have to call me anymore. If I have the time, I might as well watch more Korean dramas. The scenes where the male leads confess to each other are much more romantic than this. Without waiting for her assistant to respond, Lin Jie hung up the call and went back to sleep. When she woke up again, it was already past 3 in the afternoon. When she picked up her phone, she saw that her assistant had sent her a WeChat message. It was a few photos. Enchanting had changed from standing and shouting to kneeling with a serious face. There were several text messages below that could help with haircutting. Boss Lin, what should we do? Mr. Chen said that if you don't show up, he will keep kneeling. He'll kneel until you show up, Lin Jie replied to her assistant's message nonchalantly as she headed to the kitchen to pour herself a glass of water. If he wants to kneel, let him kneel. However, I want you to have the security escort him out and make him kneel on the streets. If he causes a ruckus, call the police. Don't tell him that it's me. Just tell him that it's an ATM machine. Oh, the ATM machine is Lin Jie. After replying to the message, Lin Jie picked up the glass of water and sat in front of the study table. She switched on her laptop, and while waiting for it to boot up, she felt bored. So, she reached out and pulled on the drawer of Xia Shangzhou's study table, and she saw something exceptionally familiar in one of the drawers. Chapter 1084. After replying to the message, Lin Jie picked up a cup of water and sat in front of the study table. She switched on her laptop, and out of boredom, she reached out to pull on the drawer of Xia Shangzhou's study table. Then, she saw something exceptionally familiar in one of the drawers. It was a hair clip. Frowning, she picked up the hair clip and raised it to her eyes to examine it carefully. The hair clip was a little old, and it was a pearl style that was popular a few years ago. She remembered that a few years ago, before this hair clip became popular, she had bought a pair of these from a designer she was familiar with. After a long period of time, there were quite a few female celebrities who wore this style of hair clip while posing at the airport, and they became popular for a very long time. However, when this hair clip became popular, she lost one of them, so the other one became useless. With such thoughts in mind, Lin Jie muttered in bewilderment. She brought the hairpin closer to examine the pearl on it, and it was only when she noticed that there was indeed a very, very small flaw on it that she realized that it was her hairpin. It was no wonder why she found it familiar. If she recalled correctly, it was the 3rd year that the navigator had been by her side when this hair clip became popular. There were many things that she didn't want that she would casually throw into the trash can or pass to the navigator to get rid of them for her. So, in truth, the navigator didn't lose this hair clip but kept it for herself. With such thoughts in mind, Lin Jie lowered her head to look at the drawer and saw a paper bag inside. She hesitated for a moment before opening it. And just as she had guessed, the miscellaneous items inside were all hers. The fountain pen that she didn't use, her hair tie, the necklace that she despised, the bolster that she suddenly didn't like, the cup that she had discarded because of her love for the new. Lin Jie didn't even flip through a single one of them before she felt something pressing against her heart, causing a shudder that she couldn't tell whether it was pain or soreness. The navigator must be sincere toward me, right? He must be, right? He must really, really like me, right? That's why he would keep all of the things that she didn't want, treating them as treasures. There were many people who liked her, but there was only one person who loved her so passionately, reluctantly, persistently, and secretly. There were many things that happened once, and if there was a second time, there would be a third time. For example, at the very start, when Liu Benlai pursued Ling Yuan only wanted to reject him. But eventually, she couldn't bring herself to do so, so she spoke to Liu Benlai for the first time, and after that, there was a second, and a third. Later on, when Ling Wan clearly didn't want to give Lu Benlai a chance, she still relented and said that she would give him a chance if it snowed on Christmas, she would become his girlfriend, and she fell deeply in love with him. Chapter 1085. Kiki pleaded with her for the entire night, and her heart softened. That night, when she learned that the person behind the phone number was Lu Benlai, she gave Lu Benlai a call for the first time and asked him if he was free to participate in the parent-child activities organized by Kiki's kindergarten. Without any hesitation, Lu Benlai agreed to it. When she told Lu Benlai the date and time, Lu Benlai replied in English. Ling Wan was a graduate of G University's English faculty. To her, those words couldn't be any easier to understand. That was something that only people like waiters would say. There were very few waiters in China who knew how to speak English, so. Lu Benlai was, with such thoughts in mind, Ling Wan asked, "You aren't in the country?" Lu Benlai, He's on a business trip in America. Back in the United States, there were only 18 hours left until Coco's kindergarten event. He could make it back in time, but wasn't that too much of a rush? After all, flying alone would take 12 hours. Ling Wan subconsciously spoke up once more, "Why don't we just forget about it? We'll talk about it next time. I'll have a good talk with Kiki." "Oh, there's no need for that. It's fine, I'll be able to rush back." A second after Lu Benlai said those words, the attendant beside him spoke up once more. Before the attendant could finish his words, Lu Benlai had already stopped him. However, through the few words that Ling Wan heard, she could roughly tell that Lu Benlai had just arrived in the United States and had just checked in at the hotel. She was just about to speak up to tell Lu Benlai that there was really no need to go through so much trouble, but before she could say anything, Lu Benlai had already said, "I'll talk to you later. I'll be hanging up first." After which, he hung up the phone. The next day, at 2:00 in the afternoon, it was time for Kiki's kindergarten's parent-child activities. Ling Wan worked in the company in the morning, and at noon, she applied for a day off from her leader. After which, she returned home and changed into casual clothes, preparing to head to kindergarten. She thought that even if Lu Benlai had rushed back, he would have headed straight to kindergarten. Never did she expect to see Lu Benlai's car parked at his favorite spot after she changed her clothes and headed downstairs. Perhaps the people in the car saw her coming out of the building and rolled down the window. Seated in the back seat, Lu Benlai's face appeared before her eyes. She didn't tell him to wear casual clothes in advance, but he had already changed into casual clothes. He looked fine, except for the dark circles under his eyes. Get in the car. I'll bring you there." Hearing Lu Benlai's words, the chauffeur immediately got out of the car and ran over to Ling Wan's side to open the car door for her. Ling Wan stared at Lu Benlai, who was seated inside, without moving. Lu Benlai pondered for a moment, and thinking that Ling Wan was unwilling to sit next to him, he spoke up once more, "You take a seat, I'll go to the front." As he spoke, he prepared to get out of the car. But before he could get down, Ling Wan lowered her head and dived into the car. After closing the car door, the chauffeur asked Lu Benlai for the address of the kindergarten before skillfully driving the car to its destination. Lu Benlai and Ling Wan sat side by side in the back seat of the car. Throughout the entire journey, they didn't speak much to one another. The theme of this parent-child activity was to make cookies. Chapter 1086. Of course, the children definitely couldn't make any cookies. They all used the dough as a toy, so things like cookies were made by their parents. Many of the children around got along well with their parents and cooperated well. As Lu Benlai and Ling Wan didn't interact much with one another, the two of them were busy with their own tasks. As a result, they weren't as fast as their parents. On top of that, it was inevitable that they would be flustered, and their work was a little messy. At first, little Kiki was quite happy. After all, it was the first time her parents had accompanied her to kindergarten for a parent-child activity. But as time went on, she realized that the people around her had a lot of teddy bears and other small animal biscuits coming out, but her parents hadn't come out at all. She immediately started to urge them, and her eyes turned red. Lu Benlai doted on little Kiki the most. Seeing that she didn't even cry, Lu Benlai immediately started coaxing her. As his interaction with Lang Nuan was too stiff, some of the parents nearby also noticed them. In order not to upset Kiki too much, and to prevent others from gossiping about her, Lu Benlai and Lang Nuan gradually began to interact with one another. Although they weren't as fast as the other parents, with their cooperation, cute animal biscuits fell into Coco's sight one by one. When the biscuits were sent into the oven, the kindergarten teacher arranged a new game for everyone while waiting for the biscuits to be cooked. It was a race. However, the premise was that the parents had to carry the baby with their left hand and right hand respectively. After the competition ended, the biscuits were almost done. Everyone took their biscuits to their own tables and began to taste the biscuits they had made. In some loving couples, the father would feed the mother, and the mother would feed the father, so Coco raised her head and made the same request. Lu Benlai and Lang Nuan didn't reject her, but Lu Benlai fed the biscuits smoothly. On the other hand, Lang Nuan had to be urged twice by Coco before she finally brought the biscuit to Lu Benlai's mouth. Lin Shi was Lang Ku's desk mate, so the two of them were sitting right next to each other. Seeing this sight, while munching on the biscuits she had made, Shi Yao leaned over to Lin Jie's ear and asked gleefully, "How is it? Do you think my idea is particularly good? With a child around, it's the easiest to ease the atmosphere and promote affection." Good my ass. For this parent-child activity, not only did he send so many ovens to the kindergarten, he even spent money to hire a baker. That was what Lin Jie was thinking, but he had always adhered to the principles of a married couple. 1. The wife was always right, and 2. When the wife was wrong, he immediately replied without any hesitation, "My dear wife is right. Yes, my dear wife is right." Lin Jie, who hadn't eaten a single biscuit yet, lowered his head to look at the baking tray and saw that there was only one biscuit left. Just as he was about to take the biscuit, Shi Yao's hand reached over and snatched it away. Of course, he didn't dare to snatch Shi Yao away from her, so he turned his demonic claws to his son instead. At some point in time, little friend Lin Shi, who had been loitering around him a moment ago, had secretly taken a bunch of biscuits with him and was walking over to Lang Nuan, Lu Benlai, and little Keek's table. With an adorable look on his face, he offered them biscuits. "Uncle Lu, I'll treat you to some biscuits I made myself." Chapter 1087. Lin Jie did such a fawning and attentive son take after. "Little crybaby, eat this. Little crybaby, don't you think this puppy looks a lot like you? You're the puppy." Coco's eyes reddened. Lin Jie did the son with such a cheap mouth take after. Had he not heard of this saying before? His mouth felt good for a moment, but the crematorium for chasing after his wife. It didn't take long for Kobayashi to return with the biscuits that Lang Nuan and Lu Benlai had made for him in Lang Nuan's bag. Little Snack took the biscuit and showed it to his parents like it was a treasure. "Mom, look, this is the biscuit my godmother gave me." "Daddy, look, little Kiki made this." Lin Jie looked at his son's face. Nash's expression, "You like it that much?" Who did Nathaniel's personality take after? After the event was over, Lin Jie, Shi Yao, Lu Benlai, and Lang Nuan brought the two children out for a meal. While the atmosphere between Lu Benlai and Lang Nuan wasn't particularly good, it was still much better than how Lang Nuan had treated Lu Benlai so decisively before. After the meal, everyone dispersed because they had brought their children. While Lu Benlai was driving Lang Nuan and Coco back, Coco accidentally rolled down the car window while they were waiting at a red light. Just as Lang Nguyen was about to press the button back, she saw a person standing by the roadside through the car window, a person whom she would remember even if he were to be reduced to ashes. Those dark, terrifying, and filthy images instantly swept into her mind. She couldn't help but tighten her grip on Coco. "Mom, it hurts." "Mom, you're too much," Kiki called out a few times, but Lang Nguyen didn't respond at all. Perplexed, Lu Benlai turned to look at Lang Nguyen. He called out to her a few times, but seeing that she was ignoring him, he followed her gaze and saw the man she was staring at. His expression immediately turned cold. It was the man who stopped him outside his company 4 years ago and told him that he had slept with Lang Nguyen. It didn't take long for the red light to turn green. However, Lu Benlai's car didn't move at all. It was only when the traffic police came over to remind him that Lu Benlai finally snapped out of his daze and started the car. Lang Nguyen also came back to her senses. She apologized to Kiki while coaxing her. As the car continued driving forward, Lu Benlai would occasionally glance at Lang Nguyen through the rearview mirror. The woman was relatively calm, but the trembling of her fingertips and the fear between her brows were obvious. If that man was her ex, she wouldn't be acting like this. After all, if it was her ex, she might be feeling hatred or sadness, but she shouldn't be feeling fear and dread. She looked like she had seen a nightmare that she didn't want to touch. What exactly happened between her and that man? Lu Benlai was perplexed throughout the entire journey. Even after he sent Lang Nguyen and Kiki home, he still couldn't let go of this question. He thought about it for a very long time, but he couldn't think of any possibility. In the end, he gave his assistant a call. It seemed that there were some things that he really needed to investigate personally. Lin Jiayi stared at the items that she had thrown away only to be collected by Xie Shangzhou for a very, very long time before she finally came back to her senses. She was originally in the mood to turn on the computer to watch a movie, but now she was no longer in the mood. She returned the things to their original positions, closed the drawer, and stared out the window for a while. Then, for some reason, she suddenly wanted to call the GPS. Chapter 1088. She was in the mood to watch a movie on her computer, but in an instant, she was no longer in the mood to do so. She returned the items back to their original positions, closed the drawer, and stared out the window for a moment. Then, for some reason, she suddenly felt the urge to call the navigator. That feeling grew stronger and stronger, and eventually, Lin Jiayi used this impulse to really dial Xie Shangzhou's number. The phone rang once before it was picked up. "Ms. Lin." In truth, Lin Jiayi didn't know what she wanted to talk to Xie Shangzhou about. She just wanted to make this call, so when she heard Xie Shangzhou's voice, she didn't know what she should say. Perhaps it was due to the lack of response from her end. Xie Shangzhou spoke up once more. "Ms. Lin." "Ms. Lin." Lin Jiayi suddenly knew what she was going to say. "Navigator, I'm not your superior anymore, so can you stop calling me Ms. Lin? You're making it sound like I'm working even when I'm on vacation." Xie Shangzhou replied with a, "All right," before he stumbled. He didn't know what he should call her. Miss Lin. Lin Jiayi. Sis Jiayi. Or the Jiayi that he only dared to call her in his heart. This time, it was Xie Shangzhou who fell silent. Lin Jiayi asked, "Why aren't you speaking?" "Nothing." Xie Shangzhou replied. "I'm just thinking about how I should address you. As long as you don't call me Ms. Lin, you can call me whatever you want." Lin Jiayi tilted her head to the side and pondered for a moment before speaking up once more. "Don't call me Miss Lin either, and don't call me Big Sis Lin either. It makes me think of Little Sis Lin." "Why don't I?" Lin Jiayi was just about to suggest calling her Big Sis Jiayi like Shi Yao did, but before she could say anything, she suddenly froze. It was precisely because the navigator had called her Ms. Lin that she didn't like the sense of alienation that she felt from him, so she wanted him to change the way he addressed her. Big Sis Jai. This title was fine for Yao Yao, but it still felt a little weird when it was used on the navigator. Before Lin Jai could continue, Xie Shangzhou asked in bewilderment, "What did you say after that? Is there no signal? Why didn't I hear anything?" "I see." Lin Jai, who hadn't said a single word at all, nodded. She reined in her wandering thoughts and said, "How about this, navigator? You can call me Jai, that's right." Jai. That sounds much better than Sis Jai. As Lin Jai nodded her head in approval, a resounding snap sounded from Xie Shangzhou's side. Lin Jai asked, "What's that sound?" "It's nothing, the dog accidentally knocked something over," Xie Shangzhou said as he bent over and rubbed his knee. "Oh, it's settled then. Don't call me Boss Lin anymore, just call me Jai instead," Lin Jai said with a smile. Then, as if teasing a snack, she turned to the phone and said, "Come, navigator, call me Jai." After saying those words, Lin Jai suddenly felt as if she wasn't toying with the GPS as a snack but a little brother. Could it be that she was old, and the old auntie's potential as a female gangster had been unearthed? Chapter 1089. His voice was soft and deep. Lin Jai's mind jolted by the word Jai. Jai, Jai. Xie Shangzhou's voice echoed in her ears. She couldn't even remember how many times she had repeated it, but she soon realized that her heart was beating really fast, and her lips couldn't help but curl up into a smile. She never knew that her name could be called out in such a pleasant manner. It was even more pleasing to the ears than the music she played when she won a piano competition back when she was younger. There were many people who called her Jai, including Enchanting. She hadn't been this happy when Enchanting called her that. The navigator sure was an exception. On the other end of the line, Lin Jai was completely immersed in her own thoughts. On the other end of the line, Xie Shangzhou's heart was pounding furiously, and even his palms were covered in a layer of sweat. Even though she didn't know what was going on through the other end of the line, he was still afraid that she would see through his thoughts through that single word. After calming himself down, he hurriedly changed the topic. "Right, did you call me for something?" "Aw. It's nothing much." Lin Jai racked her brains for a moment before replying. "It's just that. Shall we go out for dinner tonight? I haven't been to Beijing World Hotel for a long time, and I suddenly feel like eating their crab tofu." "Oh, sure." After replying to Lin Jai's words, Xie Shangzhou paused for 2 seconds before continuing, "I'm almost done here. I should be home in around an hour, so make some preparations. I'll be home by then, so let's head out for dinner." "All right." After hanging up the call, Lin Jai leaned against the chair for a moment before heading to the bathroom. After the incident with Enchanting, she didn't bring anything with her when she left home. So, after her shower, she rummaged through Xie Shangzhou's sink for a long time before she finally found a moisturizing cream and applied it on her face. After putting on her clothes, she opened the windows to feel the temperature outside, and she realized that it was much colder than it had been a few days ago. So, she walked over to the wardrobe and opened it, intending to find Xie Shangzhou's thick coat to wear. Just like when she was in her own house, she tried on every single one of Xie Shangzhou's coats and looked at them in the mirror. As she took off the clothes one by one, she saw a neat row of boxes in his closet. Judging from the packaging, they were all luxury brands such as LV, Chanel, Gucci, Miu Miu, and her favorite Hermes. Why did the navigator have so many luxurious boxes? Is there something inside or not? Curious, Lin Jai stretched out her hand, pulled out a box, and opened it. There was a pair of high heels inside. She knew that these were the most popular pair of shoes from the summer 2 years ago. She had been paying attention to them ever since the trailer was released, and she had even bought a pair of them. So it was not an empty box. With such a thought in mind, Lin Jai took out another box, and within it was a bracelet of the same design as well. Lin Jai continued to draw from the box, and this time, she found a wallet in it. It was still the wallet that she liked in the past. Chapter 1090. She couldn't be any more familiar with this bag. She had posted it on her moments a while ago, and Enchanting had even bought it for her later on. If she recalled correctly, on the day she received Enchanting's bag, Navigator had coincidentally returned from his business trip, and she had seen a Chanel box on his desk. Back then, he had told her that it was a gift that his younger sister had asked him to bring for her. She didn't know if the box she saw that day was this box, putting aside whether his younger sister really asked him to bring a gift for her or not. Even if the box I saw that day really belonged to his younger sister, why would he collect so many luxurious items? Not to mention, they are all luxurious items for women. Lin Jai's doubts deepened. She continued to open the boxes, and every single item she opened was something that she had once liked. Isn't this a little too much of a coincidence? They are all things that I used to like. Lin Jai casually picked up a jewelry box containing earrings, opened it, closed it, and then opened it again. She played around with the box absent-mindedly for a moment before accidentally dropping the packaging from the box. She hurriedly picked up the packaging, and just as she was about to put it back into the box, she realized that there was a note on the floor together with the packaging. Lin Jai picked it up in bewilderment and saw a line of tiny words written on it. She recognized it as Xie Shangzhou's handwriting. When I sent her home today, she was chatting with her friend in the car, and she said that she liked this earring. After I sent her home, I happened to pass by SKP on my way back. It wasn't closed yet, so I went in to take a look, and I didn't expect to see this earring that had just arrived. So, I bought it. But just like before, there's no reason for me to give it to her. Ungiven gift 8. It can't be that there's a note in every box, can it? With this thought in mind, Lin Jai began flipping through the boxes once more. When I accompanied her to the client's office, she was reading fashion magazines and saw the latest clothes. She seemed to like them and said that she would see if she could buy them when she went on a business trip to Hong Kong. In the end, she had something to do and couldn't go on a business trip to Hong Kong. I went alone and went to several shopping malls when I was free. Finally, I found this dress. But even if I bought it, I still didn't have the right to give it to her. I saw her post on WeChat Moments. She said that she liked the latest model of this bag. I paid special attention to it for a long time and finally ordered it. But before I got the bag, she had already bought it and carried it for a week. Actually, there was no need to buy it. Even if she bought it, no one would use it. But she still bought it. She doesn't understand herself. This bracelet is quite beautiful, but it's also quite expensive. It's made of small diamonds, and the branding fee takes up 2/3 of the price. Nevertheless, it suits her. It's also what she likes. She didn't have that much money, so she only bought a single bracelet. In order to match this bracelet, she bought a whole set of jewelry from this series. I saw her wearing it at the charity banquet, and it's very beautiful. Ungiven gift 21. Upon seeing this bracelet, Lin Jai vaguely knew who Xie Shangzhou was writing about. Chapter 1091. I know this style of bag. She has no less than 8 of them, but she will still buy the new ones when she sees them. I asked her, what's the difference between this and the one you carried before? She replied confidently, the color is different. Fine, the color is indeed different. Gift 14 that has not been given. Lin Jai looked through the notes one by one, and when she saw the last one, she was certain that the person Xie Shangzhou was writing was her. Because the words, "the color is different," had come from her mouth. When I was on a business trip, I saw her post this bag on her WeChat moments. This bag was the same as the other things I bought before. I didn't give it away, but someone did what I've always wanted to do. He bought a bag that she liked and gave it to her. She was very happy and even agreed to be that person's girlfriend. After she came out of the office, she saw the box I bought. When she asked me about it, I thought for a moment that I should give this bag to her and ask her if she was willing to be my girlfriend. But it was just a thought. I replied very timidly that this was a gift that my sister asked me to bring. I had no choice, I had to be timid. After all, to me, she was like the bright moon in the sky, the snow lotus on the mountain. She wasn't someone that I could reach out my hand and touch. Ungiven gift 36. This note was taken from the Chanel box. So, the box she saw the other day was really this box. He had bought all of these things for her. Some of them were things she had casually said she liked, some of them were things she really liked from the bottom of her heart, and some of them were things she had casually mentioned without much thought. In truth, it didn't matter what she thought of them. What was important was that he had thought that she liked them, so he had collected them all. But he clearly didn't dare to give them to her, and he didn't dare to let her know that he liked her. He knew that none of these things would ever land in her hands, so why did he still do it so foolishly? Lin Jai could clearly feel a tinge of gratitude creeping into her heart. In truth, it had been many years since she had been moved. As she grew older and matured, she slowly realized that she could live a good life without relying on a man. She had already given herself a good life, and she had never wronged herself before. As a result, there were very few things that could truly move her. But the navigator had moved her time and time again, and it was always the smallest of details. Yet, it was able to accurately strike at the softest spot in her heart. While Lin Jai was in a daze, her phone rang. It was Xie Shangzhou, telling her that he would be home in 10 minutes. After hanging up the call, Lin Jai quickly composed herself and placed the boxes back to their original positions. Then, she hung up Xie Shangzhou's clothes one by one, making it seem as if she hadn't opened the wardrobe at all. After which, she quickly changed into her shoes and headed down the stairs. Xie Shangzhou was already waiting downstairs. He had hailed a cab back home, so he didn't get it to leave. As soon as he saw Lin Jai walking out of the building, he immediately got out of the car and opened the door for her. From the moment he met Lin Jai until dinner, Xie Shangzhou couldn't help but feel that there was something on her mind. But when he tried to take a closer look at her expression, he couldn't see anything amiss. She was talking and laughing, completely different from how she usually was. He couldn't help but suspect that it was just his imagination. Chapter 1092. After dinner, Xie Shangzhou asked, "Going home?" "On." Lin Jai pondered for a moment before asking, "Do you have anything on tonight?" Xie Shangzhou shook his head. "No, what's wrong?" "If you're free, why don't we go to a nearby mall to watch a movie?" "Watching a movie? That's something only couples do." Xie Shangzhou's fingers trembled nervously for a moment before he nodded. "All right," after which, he calmed his fluctuating emotions and asked, "What movie do you want to watch?" "Let's watch the movie that's being promoted all over the world recently." "All right," Xie Shangzhou replied before taking out his phone to book the tickets. The seats for the 8 p.m. show aren't too good, but the 9:20 p.m. show has a good seat, so I'll book it for the 9:20 p.m. show. Do you think it's fine?" "Sure." Xie Shangzhou tapped on the screen for a moment before raising his head and replying to Lin Jai, "I've booked the tickets, but it's only 7:30 p.m. right now. Do you want to head over now or wait a little longer?" "Let's head over now. We can still take a look around the mall." Xie Shangzhou had no objections to that. The mall was right behind the Beijing World Hotel, and it would only take 3 to 5 minutes to get there on foot. Lin Jiayi and Xie Shangzhou arrived at the first floor of the mall before 7:40 p.m. Lin Jiayi didn't buy anything. She just picked up a few of the brands that she liked and walked around casually. When it was about time, she and Xie Shangzhou headed to the basement. Before entering the theater, Lin Jiayi didn't forget to buy 2 cups of cola and a large bucket of popcorn. Due to the movie's new release, the seats were still full. Lin Jiayi was halfway through her cola when the movie started. The plot was simply too ordinary, but the setting was indeed beautiful, and the actors were beautiful as well. But in the past few years, be it television series or movies, it had always been these few actors who acted in them. Lin Jiayi focused her attention on the movie for 20 minutes before she couldn't take it anymore. She lowered her head to look at her phone. However, due to the bright light coming from her phone, Lin Jiayi didn't dare to look at it for too long. In the end, she couldn't bear to watch the movie anymore, and her phone didn't work either. After finishing her cola and popcorn, she fell asleep out of boredom. By the time she woke up, the movie had already ended. She moved her head slightly, and only then did she realize that she was leaning on Xie Shangzhou's shoulder at some point. As for the navigator next to him, he maintained a posture in his seat, not daring to move at all. Lin Jiayi quickly sat up straight and combed her hair. She was the one who suggested watching a movie, but in the end, she ended up leaning on his shoulder and snoring away. Feeling a little embarrassed, she said that movies are really too boring. It's indeed rather boring. Seeing that Lin Jiayi had stood up, Xie Shangzhou also stood up as well. While Lin Jiayi was tidying up her clothes, she noticed that Xie Shangzhou's arm had trembled a little when he reached for the Coke bottle. Did his arm go numb from all the leaning? Lin Jiayi pursed her lips, but before Xie Shangzhou could reach for the Coke bottle once more, she had already snatched it away from him and pretended as if she hadn't noticed anything at all as she said, "Let's go." Then, he took the lead and walked towards the exit of the cinema. It was already getting late, so there weren't many people or cars on the streets. It was fortunate that Xie Shangzhou had booked a car in advance, and it was parked right across the street. While Lin Jiayi and Xie Shangzhou were crossing the street, a car with its blinding headlights suddenly sped toward them. "Be careful." Xie Shangzhou was the first to notice it, and he subconsciously called out to warn Lin Jiayi. Lin Jiayi shot a surprised glance at Xie Shangzhou. She hadn't even noticed the car when Xie Shangzhou had suddenly pulled her to the side. Before she could even steady herself, the car had already sped past her, bringing with it a gust of wind. Still in a state of shock, she raised her head to take a look and memorized the license plate number. Chapter 1093. After helping Lin Jiayi up, Xie Shangzhou immediately asked, "Are you all right?" Lin Jiayi didn't respond. She stared intently at the car that was gradually getting further and further away. Noticing Lin Jiayi's silence, Xie Shangzhou thought that she was injured somewhere, so he asked anxiously, "What's wrong? Are you injured somewhere?" As he spoke, Xie Shangzhou assessed Lin Jiayi from head to toe. Recovering from her daze, Lin Jiayi shook her head at Xie Shangzhou before glancing in the direction of the car once more before replying to Xie Shangzhou, "I'm fine." The car was already out of sight, but Lin Jiayi still stared into the distance for a moment before turning her gaze back to Xie Shangzhou. "What about you? Are you all right?" "I'm fine." Xie Shangzhou replied worriedly. "Are you sure you're not injured anywhere?" "I'm fine." Lin Jiayi replied with a faint smile. Only then did Xie Shangzhou calm down. "Let's hurry up then. The weather is a little cold, and you're not wearing much either. Don't catch a cold." Without saying a word, Lin Jiayi raised her leg. Perhaps it was due to the previous interlude, Xie Shangzhou was much more cautious when crossing the road. After getting into the car, Xie Shangzhou told the driver the address. The driver replied with a "all right" before stepping on the accelerator. As the car slowly moved forward, Lin Jiayi inadvertently glanced out of the window and caught sight of a familiar figure. She subconsciously shouted, "Stop the car," and the driver leaped in fright. He abruptly stepped on the brakes, and by the time she looked out of the window, the figure had already disappeared. "What's wrong?" Xie Shangzhou followed Lin Jiayi's gaze, only to see an empty road ahead. Lin Jiayi shook her head. "It's nothing. I might have been mistaken." "What mistake?" Xie Shangzhou asked curiously. Lin Jiayi wasn't in a hurry to respond to Xie Shangzhou's words. Instead, she turned to the driver and said, "Let's go. I thought that I saw someone familiar, but there wasn't anyone." "Oh." Xie Shangzhou responded and did not ask any further questions. Lin Jiayi didn't say anything else either. It was very quiet in the car, but her eyes, which Xie Shangzhou didn't notice, gradually turned cold as she looked out the window. Although she didn't see anything when she looked over, she was certain that she wasn't mistaken. That familiar figure was definitely Qin Ting. Why was he on the road in the middle of the night? For some reason, Lin Jiayi couldn't help but recall the car that had nearly crashed into her earlier. She didn't know if she was too sensitive, but she felt that the scene just now wasn't purely an accident. With this thought in mind, Lin Jiayi took out her phone and sent a message to her assistant. After returning home, Lin Jiayi first went to take a shower. By the time she came out, it was already 12:30. She climbed onto her bed, and coincidentally, her phone screen lit up. Her assistant had replied to the message she had sent her earlier. "Boss Lin, I've contacted the driver. He does know Mr. Qin, and he told me that Mr. Qin asked him to help him create a scene of a hero saving a damsel in distress. The driver repeatedly assured me that he didn't want to do anything to you. He also said that Mr. Qin was right next to him. His main purpose was to put on a show of self-injury." Sure enough, the driver was related to Qin Ting. Chapter 1094. This kind of person, sure is ruthless. With such thoughts in mind, Lin Jiayi lowered her head and replied to her assistant, "I understand. Then, Boss Lin, if there's nothing else, I'll be heading to bed." Lin Jiayi replied with a, "All right." She put down her phone, and roughly 2 minutes later, she picked it up again and sent another message to her assistant. "Right, have you settled the matter I asked you to help me with?" "It's done. I'm awaiting your instructions." Lin Jiayi had barely finished reading her assistant's message when another message appeared on her screen. "Boss Lin, if you've decided to do it, please inform me in advance. After all, it'll take some time to prepare. Then get ready tomorrow morning. Let me know one day in advance." "Yes, Boss Lin." Lin Jiayi didn't respond to her assistant's message. After putting down her phone, she stared at the night sky outside the window, and her expression turned cold. She didn't want to make a move so soon, but Qin Ting had clearly gone mad. He had resorted to a car accident this time, but was he going to come up with something even more disgusting next time? Fortunately, they had the GPS today. If they didn't have it, based on her situation at that time, she might have been knocked to the ground before he could save the damsel in distress. Forget it, there's no need to waste my time with such a person. After the parent-child activity at the kindergarten, Lin Yuan didn't see Lu Benlai at her apartment for an entire week. Countless possibilities surfaced in her mind. Was he sick? Or was he in trouble? Or did he suddenly run out of patience and didn't want to wait outside her building day in and day out anymore? Such speculations would surface in Lin Yuan's mind almost every night, so much so that she almost asked Shi Yao about Lu Benlai's situation several times over the phone. Lu Benlai guessed that there must be some kind of secret between Lin Yuan and that man. Before he found out the truth, he couldn't figure out what had happened between the two of them, but he didn't expect that the ending he found out would leave him filled with so much regret that he couldn't help but want to give himself 2 tight slaps. The day after Lu Benlai decided to investigate the matter between Lang Wan and that man, he brought his secretary back to the city where Lang Wan's parents lived. Naturally, he didn't meet Lang Wan's parents directly. Instead, he learned about Lang Wan's situation from her parents' neighbors. In the end, it was an old lady who told him that Lang Wan's parents weren't from this area. She had only moved here about 10 years ago, and the old lady of the neighborhood said that they were here to treat their daughter's illness. They said that their daughter was a retard who couldn't speak and was afraid to meet others. The old lady also said that she had lived here for more than a decade, and she had only met Lang Wan twice. The first time was when she was delivering community welfare to Lang Wan's family, and they bumped into each other in the living room. However, Lang Wan didn't even greet her. In fact, she even hid back into her room out of fear. The second time she met her was when she was admitted into G University. She still didn't like to speak much, but when she saw her, she smiled at her. As the old madam spoke, she complimented Lang Wan's beauty, saying that she was the prettiest girl she had seen in the 10 years she had lived here. Chapter 1095. It could be seen that the old lady was a chatterbox. After telling Lu Benlai everything he knew, she even told him something bizarre. Do you know? That girl is so pretty. She should be around 26 or 27 years old now, right? Maybe even older. Logically speaking, when she's at the age of marriage, there should be quite a lot of people going to their house to introduce her to a husband. But I don't know why, but her mother directly rejected them. She said that their daughter doesn't want to get married. She even said that as long as their daughter is happy, it's fine. She doesn't need to get married. Are you stupid? Which woman doesn't want to get married? The more Lu Benlai listened, the more he felt that something was amiss. When he asked the old lady again, the old lady shook her head and said she didn't know. She didn't know anything else. Lu Benlai could tell that the old lady wasn't trying to hide anything from him, so he asked where Lang Wan's family had moved from. The old lady wasn't too sure, but judging from her accent, it seemed like they were from S City. Seeing that he was unable to get any more information out of her, Lu Benlai thanked the old lady before returning to the hotel. After which, he had his secretary continue to look into the matter. Due to the long period of time that had passed, it took a lot of effort before he managed to find Lang Wan's hometown. The old madam was right. Lang Wan was indeed from S City, but it was just a town under S City. Lu Benlai felt that the answers he was looking for should be in Lang Wan's hometown. Thus, he had his secretary book a high-speed rail ticket and rushed over to that small town. The town was actually quite beautiful, with verdant hills and clear waters. Other than the inconvenient transportation, there were almost no other shortcomings. By the time Lu Ben arrived in town, it was already midnight. He found a guest house to stay in, and while chatting with the owner of the guest house, he asked if there were any old shops in town. Then he learned that the roast chicken shop in the west of town had been in business for several generations. Lu Benlai knew that in a small town like this, no matter what happened to a family, every family would know about it. Thus, the longer one stayed here, the more they would know about the incident that happened 10 years ago. The next morning, Lu Benlai headed to the roasted chicken restaurant. He didn't beat around the bush, saying that he was from Beijing and wanted to understand the situation there. After which, he mentioned Lang Wan's name. Upon hearing the words Lang Wan, the lady boss of the roasted chicken shop immediately asked, "You know Lang Wan? Is she doing well now? Are you still as silly as before? Was Lang Wan a fool?" Lu Benlai was perplexed, but he still replied honestly, "I know her. We're university classmates, and she's doing quite well at the moment. She's working at a very good foreign corporation in Beijing. When the lady boss heard this, she immediately smiled in relief. That's really a good thing. I was really afraid that the girl would be ruined just like that. It was destroyed. Lu Benlai couldn't help but ask, why did you say that? Also, I think she's pretty smart. Why do you say she's stupid? Chapter 1096. It's just the street in front of us. Back then, there weren't many cars in the area, so the kids would often play with rubber bands here. Little Lass Nguyen would often come here to play, and she's a very sensible girl. Sometimes, when I'm moving things around, she'll even come over to help me. Her mother's craftsmanship is amazing, and the dresses she makes for her are especially beautiful. Sometimes, when her mother comes back from a big city, she'll also bring back exquisite dresses for her. Right, I forgot to tell you. Back then, their family was one of the wealthiest in our town. We all thought that little Lass Nguyen would have the potential to enter a university and earn big bucks in the future, but it's a pity that that incident happened. The lady boss had mentioned that incident twice in a row, and Lu Benlai realized that this was the main point he was looking for. Lady boss, can you tell me what happened? This. The lady boss stuttered and didn't continue. Don't worry, I won't tell anyone about it. The reason why I'm here is to find out what happened to her in the past. To tell you the truth, she's actually the mother of my child now, all the more reason why I can't tell you about it. What if you despise her if I tell you? No, lady boss, there's really no need for you to worry about that. I can only help her if I know what happened to her in the past, so, in the end, she still hasn't walked out of it after all these years. But that's true. After all, who can walk out of it just like that? The lady boss's words made Lu Benlai even more eager to know the truth. After assuring the lady boss for a long time, the lady boss finally relented. Something happened to little Lass when she was 15. Something happened to little girl Nguyen when she was 15. At that time, her mother enrolled her in a cram school. Every weekend, she had to go to the teacher's house for cram lessons. The teacher who taught her was Teacher Zhang. Because of little girl Nguyen's incident, he lost his job, but it wasn't Teacher Zhang's fault. It was Teacher Zhang's nephew. He's a local hooligan in our town, and he learned everything. That brat probably saw that little girl Nguyen was pretty, so he set his eyes on little girl Nguyen. Later on, after little girl Nguyen finished her cram lessons, her parents might have been busy, so they didn't pick her up. That was the only time they didn't pick her up, and that brat targeted her. That's right, 4 years ago, that man was released from prison. I think he was in Beijing. This morning, as soon as Lin Jia woke up, she received a message from her assistant. Boss Lin, I've already arranged everything for you. Let's meet at the Beijing World Hotel at 6 tonight. Is that okay? Sure. After replying to her assistant's message, Lin Jia got up and washed up before heading to the living room. Just like every other day, Xie Shangzhou had already prepared breakfast. Upon seeing her, he immediately greeted her with a morning greeting and beckoned her over for breakfast. Lin Jia stared at Xie Shangzhou for a moment before walking over. She pulled out a chair and sat down. She picked up the youtiao that Xie Shangzhou passed over and took a bite. After which, she raised her head and looked at Xie Shangzhou. Navigator. Chapter 1097. Lin Jia stared at Xie Shangzhou for a moment before she walked over, pulled out a chair, and sat down. She picked up the youtiao that Xie Shangzhou passed over and took a bite before raising her head to look at Xie Shangzhou. Navigator. Xie Shangzhou scooped a cup of soy milk for Lin Jia as he replied with a soft, Lin Jia paused for a few seconds before saying, I'm leaving. Xie Shangzhou's fingers trembled slightly, seemingly unable to comprehend the meaning behind her words. It took a long while before he raised his head to look at Lin Jiayi and asked, "You're leaving?" "Yes. Thank you for taking me in all this while, but I'll have to return to work eventually, and I'll have to return to where I belong. Indeed, no matter how happy I've been lately, it's only temporary. She'll have to leave sooner or later. From the start to the end, she's never belonged to him. I should be very satisfied that she's been able to stay with me for so long." With such thoughts in mind, Xie Shangzhou lowered his head, fearing that Lin Jiayi would notice something from his expression. He tried his best to calm his emotions before he finally spoke up. "Do you want to go straight to the company or go home? Do you need me to send you?" "There's no need for that. I'll get my assistant to pick me up. She'll be here around 8:10 a.m. Xie Shangzhou replied with an "oh" before placing the soy milk in front of Lin Jiayi. "Thank you." Lin Jiayi added some sugar into the soy milk, stirred it a little, and took 2 sips with a gentle expression on her face. Xie Shangzhou stood at the opposite side of the table, dazed for a moment before he glanced at the clock on the living room wall. It was already almost 8 a.m. There were only 10 minutes left before she would leave. He stared at the clock for a moment before turning his gaze back to Lin Jiayi. He gazed at her beautiful face, and his lips twitched a little, but in the end, he still couldn't bring himself to say it. Indeed, it wasn't that he couldn't bring himself to say it, but that he didn't have the right to say it. He wanted to ask her if she would still come to his house in the future. He wanted to ask her if he could look for her more often in the future. But he really didn't have the right to say those words. He wasn't worthy of her, so he couldn't play those ambiguous games with her for his own selfish desires. Silently, Xie Shangzhou scooped himself a bowl of soy milk before sitting down in front of Lin Jiayi and munching on his breakfast in a daze. In fact, every morning in the past, he and she would eat these things, and he would always feel extremely satisfied. But today, no matter how much sugar was added, he still felt that the soybean milk was bitter. Before she could finish her breakfast, Lin Jiayi's phone suddenly rang. It was a call from her assistant. She was already downstairs. Lin Jiayi was almost done with her breakfast. She raised her head to look at Xie Shangzhou, who hadn't eaten much yet, and after a moment of contemplation, she turned to her assistant and said, "Wait a moment for her." After Xie Shangzhou finished his breakfast, Lin Jiayi offered to help him tidy up the table, but Xie Shangzhou simply smiled and said, "There's no need for that. I'll do it myself." A moment later, Xie Shangzhou said, "Isn't your assistant here already? If you have something to do, then go and do it." Lin Jiayi replied with an as she sat on the chair for a while longer before saying, "I'll be taking my leave then. If there's anything, let's keep in touch via phone." Xie Shangzhou was so flustered that he blurted out the word "okay" twice. After that, he could not say anything else and went to wash the dishes. Chapter 1098. From start to finish, Xie Shangzhou didn't even look back. It wasn't until the movement behind him disappeared, the door was pulled open and closed, and the whole room was completely silent that the bowl in his hand fell into the dishpan with a thud. After which, he turned around and ran to the balcony. He stared at the scene below for a moment before she walked out of the building and got into the car that was waiting for her. The car soon started, and as the car drove further and further away, Xie Shangzhou suddenly felt as if his small house had suddenly become cold and empty. Lin Jiayi had her assistant send her home. She spent a long time in the changing room before calling her assistant over to pack all the things she had sorted out into a bag and carry it to the trunk of the car downstairs. After that, Lin Jiayi went to the company for a meeting. By the time she returned to her office, it was already around 3 in the afternoon. She instructed her assistant to prepare the car before heading back to her office to put on her coat. Just as she was about to head down the stairs in her high heels, a thought suddenly occurred to her, and she turned back to her desk. She pulled open the drawer, took out the box containing the diamond ring, and placed it into her bag. Lin Jie didn't head straight to Beijing World Hotel. Instead, she headed to a nearby shopping mall and had a comfortable spa session upstairs. After which, she straightened her hair, which she would always straighten whenever she saw Enchanting, into her favorite big curls. She even applied a gentle peach-colored eyeshadow and a bright red lip gloss. After which, she spun 2 rounds in front of the full-length mirror and took a good look at her beautiful and domineering self in the mirror. Only then did she put on her thin and tall shoes and hurriedly rushed down the stairs with her assistant, got into the car, and drove straight to Beijing World Hotel. Even though she had arranged to meet Enchanting at 6, it was already around 6:30 by the time Lin Jie arrived. When the manager of Beijing World Hotel welcomed her, he told her that Mr. Qin had already arrived before 5:30, and he had been waiting in the suite for more than an hour. Lin Jie nodded in response. Her shoes stepped on the bright marble floor, producing a crisp and pleasant sound. The manager personally escorted Lin Jie to the door of the suite. Pushing the door open, Lin Jie immediately saw Enchanting pacing around anxiously in the suite. Hearing the commotion, Enchanting immediately turned his head around. Before the manager could inform him that Miss Lin had arrived, he had already rushed up to Lin Jie and said, "Jie, you're finally here." Lin Jie shot a glance at Enchanting and shot him an awkward yet polite smile. After which, she walked over to the dining table, and after the manager pulled out the main seat for her, she sat down gracefully. Enchanting followed closely behind her and said, "Jie, I bought you a present. Do you like it?" As he spoke, he took out a box from his pocket. Lin Jie didn't bother looking at the gifts. Instead, she turned to the manager and said, "Serve the dishes." "Yes, Miss Lin." After the manager left, Lin Jie turned to her assistant and said, "Sit down." "What are you standing for?" "Yes, Boss Lin." Hearing Lin Jie's words, Lin Jie's assistant immediately ran over, pulled out a chair, and sat down beside her. Chapter 1099. Tell me then, what did you do wrong? Enchanting was at a loss for words. After a moment, he said, "I don't think I did anything wrong, isn't that right?" "You didn't do anything wrong, so why should I get angry? What you said just now made me think that you had done something to let me down and that you were feeling guilty. How could that be? Jie, how could I possibly do anything to let you down?" There's nothing else then." Hearing Lin Jie's words, Enchanting couldn't help but feel a little perplexed. But at the same time, he had a feeling that Lin Jie couldn't possibly know about his affairs. After a moment of hesitation, he passed the present over to Lin Jie once more and asked, "Jie, take a look at this present." As he spoke, Enchanting opened the box. Lin Jie took a look at it. It was the latest diamond necklace, and it was quite expensive. She didn't say whether she liked it or not, but she simply said, "It's quite nice." "Indeed. The first time I saw it, I felt that it suits you very well. Shall I help you put it on?" "Sure." Lin Jie didn't turn down his offer. By the time Enchanting was done helping her put on the necklace, the dishes had already been served. Enchanting pulled out a chair and sat down, only to realize that they had booked a large compartment, and the dishes that Lin Jie had ordered were enough for at least 10 people. He turned to Lin Jie curiously and asked, "Jie, aren't there just the 3 of us? Why did you order so many dishes?" "Oh, I forgot to tell you that there are more than just the 3 of us." Lin Jie paused for a moment before continuing. "There are some other friends that I can introduce to you." Qin Ting replied with an "oh" as a hint of delight surfaced on his face. Lin Jie noticed the gleeful gleam in Zhang Xian's eyes, but she simply turned to her assistant with a smile. Noticing her gaze, the assistant immediately took out her phone and started sending a message. Not too long later, someone knocked on the door of the compartment. Lin Jie said, "Come in," and the door was pushed open. The manager walked in with a man in tow. When Qin Ting saw the man's face, his face immediately warped in horror. Lin Jie calmly stood up and shook the man's hand before turning to Qin Ting. "Qin Ting, allow me to introduce you. This is my friend, Mr. Zhang. Director Zhang, this is Qin Ting." "Oh, hello, Mr. Qin." Manager Zhang said and extended his hand to Qin Ting. Seeing that Manager Zhang did not expose him, Qin Feng calmed down a little. Then, he reached out his hand and shook Manager Zhang's hand. "Hello, Manager Zhang. It's our first time meeting. Please forgive me." Hearing the words "first meeting," Lin Jie's lips curled into a smile before she gestured for everyone to take their seats. After chatting for a while longer, Qin Ting felt more and more at ease. It was then that someone knocked on the door once more, and the manager walked in with another person in tow. This time, it was Chief Qin. Lin Jie pretended that Qin Ting and Chief Qin didn't know each other, so she introduced them to one another. As the door was knocked again and again, the originally empty room was filled with people. All of them had been cheated by Qin Ting using the Lin family enterprise to cooperate and get money. Although none of them said they knew Qin Ting, her forehead was already covered in sweat. Chapter 1100. Lin Jie didn't stop Qin Ting. She simply allowed him to run toward the exit. The door was pushed open by Qin Ting, and two burly men dressed in black suits appeared in front of him. They raised their hands coldly and blocked Qin Ting's path. Standing outside of the burly men were the manager of the Peking Hotel and a woman. The manager ignored Qin Ting and turned to Lin Jie, who was sitting inside. "Mr. Lin, your friend is here again. Invite her in," Lin Jie said with a smile. Hearing Lin Jie's words, the burly man immediately lowered his arm. As the woman walked in, Qin Ting's legs began to tremble. He subconsciously wanted to rush out of the door, but the two burly men reacted much faster than him. They quickly stopped him and said, "I'm sorry, Mr. Qin. Miss Lin has instructed us in advance that without her permission, only people can enter and not leave this room." "You're right." After saying so, the burly men forcefully pushed Qin Ting back into the room and closed the door. Lin Jie waited until the woman walked into the suite before she slowly rose to her feet. With graceful steps, she walked over to the woman who had been staring at Qin Ting all this while, and with a smile on her face, she asked, "Qin Ting, do you know her?" The woman didn't speak. She only stared at Qin Ting. Qin Ting didn't even dare to look at the woman. He shook his head and said, "No, I don't know her. I don't know who she is." Hearing this answer, the woman subconsciously opened her mouth to speak, but before she could open her mouth, Lin Jie reached out and touched her arm, stopping her. "All right, since you don't know her, allow me to introduce her to you. She's Song Ying, the only daughter of a wealthy family in Song Empire. She's from Shanghai, and she got married 10 years ago. Her husband is Qin Ting." "Oh, this Qin Ting. Not only does he have the same name as you, even his date of birth, appearance, and birthplace are exactly the same as yours. Some time ago, I was fortunate enough to get to know Miss Song and befriend her. I heard that she's been looking for a husband, so I invited her over. Qin Ting, take a good look at her and see if she's really your wife or not. Qin Ting, take a good look at her and see if she's really your wife." Hearing those words, Enchanting's face paled. No, I'm not. I'm not her husband. Jai, don't listen to her nonsense. She's just making things up. You're spouting nonsense. Enchanting, you. Song Ying couldn't hold herself back any longer. However, she was still the daughter of a wealthy family, and due to her upbringing, she didn't utter any vulgarities. In the end, she could only angrily take out the marriage certificate from her bag and shout. Take a look at what this is. Enchanting took a glance at the marriage certificate and said, You bought this marriage certificate with your own money, right? This is fake, right? That's right, it's fake. Jai, I've never loved her, I don't even know who she is. Jai, you have to believe me, why you? Song Ying pointed at Enchanting with reddened eyes. What do you mean by I? Do I even know you? What kind of grudge do you have against me for you to do this to me? Enchanting interjected furiously, but before he could finish his words, Lin Jai, who was standing right beside Song Ying, abruptly sent a kick right into his abdomen. Yes, you're right. She doesn't know you, and you aren't even a human, so how can you possibly know her? As soon as Lin Jai said those words, before anyone could see what had happened, Lin Jai executed a dashing shoulder throw, sending Enchanting crashing to the ground. Chapter 1101. Song Ying's body trembled in fear, and she staggered several steps backward. Even the men seated around the dining table were stunned by Lin Jai's sudden outburst of valiance. Enchanting's eyes were dazed for a moment before he finally recovered from his daze. Then, he turned to Lin Jai with a look of disbelief. He didn't say a word, but there was a questioning look in his eyes. It was as if he was silently asking Lin Jai how she had suddenly turned into such a terrifying figure. Facing his astonished gaze, Lin Jai's eyebrows shot up, and with a haughty air, she looked down at Enchanting disdainfully and mocked, Why? Are you wondering how I ended up like this? Don't worry, I'll tell you later. Right now, I have something more important to do. As Lin Jai spoke, she grabbed Enchanting by his collar and mercilessly slapped his face several times. Everyone in the room was stunned by Lin Jai's imposing manner. None of them dared to make a sound. Other than the sound of Lin Jai slapping Enchanting's face, there was no other sound in the room. No one knew how many times Lin Jai had slapped Enchanting, but they knew that a grown man like Enchanting was as weak as a helpless child before Lin Jai. He didn't even have the chance to retaliate before Lin Jai pummeled him senseless. Lin Jai waited until the indignation in her chest subsided before she placed her foot on Enchanting's chest and leaned forward to look him in the eye. You don't have to wonder how I became like this. This is how I've always looked like. Let me tell you, when I was 4, I beat up the entire kindergarten. Not a single child dared to speak to me. When I was in the 2nd grade, I single-handedly beat up 5 5th-grade boys. Even when I was in middle school, those 5 boys would still avoid me. I've told you the truth, haven't I? I don't like straight hair at all, and I don't like dressing up like a lady. I like dressing up like this. I have the capital, and I'm beautiful. Why don't I let myself live more comfortably? I must have been F***king blind to have done those stupid things for you. Also, Enchanting, do you think you're so smart that you can fool everyone? How dare you try to deceive me? Do you think I'm a vegetarian? Let me tell you, today's meal isn't a meal to reconcile with you, it's a hongmen banquet. Do you know what a hongmen feast is? If you don't understand, go back and flip through the history books. I think you must be tired of living. How dare you provoke me after getting married? As Lin Jai spoke, she suddenly felt a surge of anger welling up within her, and without any hesitation, she grabbed Enchanting and pummeled her once more. Chapter 1102. Also, I don't want to bring up this stain on my life, but Lin Jie isn't the kind of person to hide things. I'll admit that I was blind back then. But of course, if not for me, he wouldn't have been able to deceive you. So, I'll give you an explanation here as well. After which, Lin Jie turned to her assistant and asked, "Where are the items?" The assistant replied, "They've been brought to the door." Good. Lin Jie nodded. Facing the tightly shut door, she raised her voice and said, "Bring the items in." "Yes, Boss Lin." Shortly after she said those words, a male voice sounded from outside. Following which, the door to the suite was pushed open, and two burly men dressed in black suits walked into the suite with several attendants carrying bags of various sizes. After placing the items on the floor, the attendants retreated. After the door was closed, Lin Jie turned to the people seated around the dining table and said, "These are all gifts from him, and they are all luxury goods. Based on my many years of experience in buying and selling, I can guarantee that they are all authentic goods. You can take them to a second-hand shop and sell them for quite a sum of money." As Lin Jie spoke, she tore off the necklace that Enchanting had given her earlier. Then, she opened her bag and took out the large diamond ring before slamming it on the table. "And these. Especially this diamond. Be it in terms of clarity or carat count, it can be sold for a high price." Lin Jie pondered for a moment before walking over to Enchanting. As soon as she bent down, Enchanting suddenly clutched his head. Seeing his reaction, Lin Jie couldn't help but recall the comical scene many years ago when Navigator first entered the company. Whenever she slammed the table, tossed the documents aside, and glared at him, he would immediately run away while clutching his head. Lin Jie was stunned for a moment before she turned her gaze back to Enchanting. She stared at the clothes he was wearing and the watch on his wrist, and without any hesitation, she took off his clothes and watch before tossing them over to the crowd and said, "These too, they're worth some money too." Lin Jie pondered for a moment before taking out a car key from Enchanting's pocket. "And this car, it can be sold for some money too. I rented the watch and the car." Enchanting subconsciously wanted to stop him. But before he could even get close to Lin Jie had already kicked him to the ground. "What does it have to do with me? All I know is that these things belong to you now. They are your creditors, so they have the right to take them away. As for what you used to pay the rent, you can redeem it if you have the ability. If not, then you're dead." After choking on Enchanting's words, Lin Jie told everyone about Enchanting's car plate number. After which, she realized that there was nothing else she needed to say, so she turned to Song Ying. She stared at her for a while before she walked over. Lin Jie halted her footsteps and said, "I'm sorry." Song Ying was dumbfounded by these three words. Lin Jie continued, "I'm sorry. I didn't know that you were already married to him, but the time I spent with him still hurt you. I apologize to you for that." Chapter 1103. Lin Jie really felt sorry for Song Ying, even though she wasn't the one who caused this tragic marriage. She stared at the crying Song Ying for a moment before sighing in her heart. "I know that you're very sad, and I know that you can't let it go. 10 years is a very long period of time in one's life, and it's hard for anyone to let it go. But I just want to say that it's not worth it for such a person. You're still young, you've taken good care of yourself, and you're very pretty. You can live for yourself, for your parents, and for the people who care about you in this world. For a scumbag like him, you're not willing to admit that you're his wife in the face of glory and wealth, and he even accused you of lying. Even if your tears run dry and your heart is broken, he won't feel sorry for you. No matter what happens, you must never give up on yourself. You must remember that a woman can love a man, but she must love herself too. So, I really hope that you can start a new life. For example, divorce this scumbag, find a stable job, raise a pet, buy a small house, and live a comfortable life. Like I said earlier, you're very beautiful, and you're not old yet. There are many good men in the world, and you can start a new life. As Lin Jai spoke, she took out a tissue from her bag and passed it to Song Ying. Wipe your tears. If you really feel that you've lost everything after losing him, as long as you're willing, you can still think about it. You still have me, you have my phone number, so you can call me anytime. I'm willing to arrange a job for you at the Lin Family Enterprise. If you wish to continue staying in Shanghai, that's fine too. There's a branch there. Lin Jai gestured to Qin Ting by the side and said, if you feel indignant, you can do what I did and beat him up to vent your anger. Or, if you don't want to drink alone, I'm more than willing to accompany you anytime. But, remember, it's not worth it to get drunk for someone like him. After saying those words, Lin Jai turned to Song Ying with a smile as she pushed the napkin in her hand forward. Song Ying reached out to take it. As she wiped away her tears, she said to Lin Jai softly, "Thank you." Lin Jai replied gently, "It's all right." After leaving the Beijing World Hotel, Lin Jai, who hadn't touched her chopsticks at all, felt a little hungry. So, she had her assistant send her to a noodle shop and ordered a bowl of noodles. When the waitress went up, she looked at the waitress and suddenly remembered that this noodle restaurant was introduced to her by the navigator. After they finished work, they came here many times to eat noodles. Every time, the GPS would bring the noodles to her, just like the waiter who was approaching her now. He would even say happily, "The noodles are here." When the noodles were placed in front of her, Lin Jai suddenly burst into laughter. She didn't know what she was happy about, but she just smiled. You're tuning in to the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.